you have microphones on mute. You can keep your camera on, but only put it on when you're about to speak so the meeting doesn't get disturbed. In case of technical problem, the meeting may adjourn for a short while to try and resolve the issues. The meeting is being audio and video recorded and will be available on Watch Listen on the website. Can I ask members and other attendees to be courteous and respectful to speakers and to keep to timings? I would also ask that members avoid using the chat function as it can be distracting to many and particularly to me while I'm controlling the meeting. So let us start the meeting with the prayers. My chaplain, His Holiness Sri Raj Rajeshwar Guruji, founder and spiritual leader of the International Siddhasam Shakti Center, will say prayers. Guruji, please. Guruji, you can unmute yourself. Is he dropped out?
I saw him drop. He has dropped out actually.
Okay, let's wait for him to come back.
Just to say, Mr. Mayor, that I'm now sharing Councillor Hinckley's device, as are the motes, so we have permission.
Are you two on the same video screen? Both
yes,
of you?
John is there.
I can see them. Yeah, I can see you both. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Andre, is it possible to try and connect Guruji?
Yes, Chair, just give us a second, we'll try and get him back in.
Sure, let's wait for him.
Thank you very much.
Who can't they get in there?
Guruji.
Last time I forgot his name, now he's dropped out.
His IT at his best. He was on for a little while and just sadly just disappeared.
Yeah. Andre, any news on that?
Sure. So, Mr. Mayor, we're just on the phone to him now. He's just having some issues, but he'll be in shortly.
Sure, thanks.
Otherwise, I'm quite happy to do the prayers if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
I think we'll wait for another minute or so. Let's see, he's trying his best anyway.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor is going to dial in by phone.
Okay, sure. Andre, any news on it now?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's just dialing in now. It should come up any second now.
Thank you. Great.
Mr. Mayor, he's coming in now, so he's in the meeting.
Great. Yeah, okay. Guruji, let's say a prayer, please.
Om Gam Ganapate Namaha. Om Namo Vignarajaya. Saraswati Devaya. Vishwaya Vinashaya Parai Paramatmane.
I think let's count that as a prayer and let's continue the meeting. Thank you, Guruji. Okay, since our last virtual meeting in autumn, we have all been going through yet another COVID lockdown. Over last year, COVID has affected all of us and many residents have suffered from this terrible disease. And sadly, some have lost their lives. And to commemorate those whom we have lost, we are going to plant 21 trees, one for each ward later this year. I hope that you and your families are well and have come through it safely. Some of you may have been grieving for friends, family members or colleagues who have not survived. And I offer my heartfelt condolences at this difficult time. However, the light at the end of the tunnel is the swift rollout of the vaccine, which I'm sure many of you have already had. As you may know, that Harrow is the best performing in terms of vaccine take-up in London. We have administered over 1/3 of the eligible population, that is nearly 67,000 jabs. We all owe a huge debt of gratitude to NHS, other support workers and an army of volunteers. And I'm sure some of you have done the same, volunteering for COVID vaccine. These volunteers have selflessly brought us through even higher peaks of COVID virus, and I'm sure you will join me in thanking them for their immense hard work and devotion during these past few months. As a mayor, I am truly humbled by all the wonderful work which is still being carried out, and it is a privilege to thank our NHS superheroes as well as Heroes countless voluntary organizations and volunteers who continue to make a difference to those in need. Thank you all. Now let us move to the items on agenda. Item number 1, declaration of interest. Can we take as read the published declaration of interest for the meeting, and I remind members that they need to leave the meeting if they have a disclosable pecuniary interest in an item on the summons. Councillor Varsha Palmer has recorded her disclosure of pecuniary interest and dispensation. Item number 2, minutes. Can we note that agreement to the minutes of the meeting held on 26 November 2020 has been published on the website? Do we agree that?
Noted.
Thank you.
Noted.
Agreed.
you.
Thank you.
Item number 3. Members, you will be aware that we usually start council meetings at, that is mainly procedural motions. We are going on now, item number 3. We usually start council meetings at 7:30 with the bulletin at 10:30 p.m. Given the earlier start time of this meeting, I propose that the bulletin be at 9:30 p.m. Is that agreed? Graham?
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank
Mr. Mayor,
you.
Mr. Mayor, can we just add on a few minutes because we did lose some time due to technical difficulties?
I will use my discretion there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I draw members' attention to the budget procedure motion on the summons and amendment to the budget recommendations set out in the table documents? Is the procedural motion on the budget agreed? Graham?
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Agree, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4, petitions. Do any residents wishes to present a petition? I don't have any notified so far, so let's move to the next one. Do any members of the council wish to present petitions? I understand that Councillor John Hinckley will present a petition on behalf of the residents of Royston Park Road. Please read the terms of the petition to the meeting, Councillor Hinckley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a petition with 148 signatories representing 87% of the residents of Royston Park Road in Hatch End. The title of the petition is Stop Speeding on Royston Park Road, Hatch End. We, the undersigned, residents of Royston Park Road, request that Harrow Council takes urgent action to control the excessive speeding in this road. This road is used as a rat run by drivers going to and from Oxley Lane to Hatch End, and this, combined with a large number of learner drivers in the area, has resulted in a number of significant accidents and damage to property. We would like this action taken immediately to avoid further incidents and a serious road traffic accident. We note that when getting the signatures, a considerable number of residents said they would not want speeding bumps along the road. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The petition received will be referred to the relevant corporate director. Item number 5, public questions. There is one public question. Is Mr. Raj Adatya here? I hope I pronounced the surname properly.
Yes.
So can you read your question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you believe Harrow Council responds to and resolve residents' queries in a timely manner?
Thank you for your question. I believe. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question. I believe that in general we do certainly endeavour to get back to residents in a timely manner, and in the main we're successful doing so.
I've got a supplementary question.
Any supplementary, please?
Yes, I have.
Thank you, Raj.
I have logged numerous requests since 2013 regarding trimming the tree outside 13 Emsley Avenue, and after 7 years, they trimmed the branch or branches over the telephone wire only, but did not clear the long outstanding issue and overall trim as it leaves, and the branches are really impinging on the properties it covers. Given that Harrow Council charges one of the highest council taxes in London, do you think it is acceptable to do nothing for 7 years? And will you give me a personal assurance that the tree will be addressed?
Councillor Swansky, please.
Thanks very much for the supplementary question. And obviously I wasn't aware of the particular issue around the tree outside your house. And Mr. Datia, obviously I'm really happy to pass that on to the relevant officers. You've got all the senior officers of the council here. You've got all the cabinet members and councillors as well. So we can absolutely follow up and get back to you. I mean, I would say that in general, you know, we handled over 4 million inquiries across the year, across all our ways of contacting the council. And, you know, in the contact centre particularly, the average wait time is 86 seconds, and just about 90% of the issues are resolved at the first point of contact. So we do our very, very best to get back to residents as quickly as we possibly can. But if we haven't done so in your case, obviously we're very happy to follow up with you.
Could you give me the time frame when this is going to be happen?
Sorry, there's no further question. Adam, thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item number 6, leaders and portfolio holders announcement. I call upon leader to make his announcement, please. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we met this time last year, Adam briefly updated members of the work being undertaken to prepare for the COVID disease, since a public health emergency of international concern was announced on the 30th of January. 1 year ago today, the Prime Minister decided to reject scientists' advice on partial lockdown. On this Monday, the Prime Minister set out a timetable for how the country will move out of lockdown, and it must be noted that it's based on the virus being brought under control and the vaccination programme delivered on time. The work of everyone involved in the vaccine rollout, from the scientists and the NHS through to the council and volunteers, has been brilliant. They're doing a grand job ensuring the first dose of the vaccine is offered to everyone in the top priority groups in the borough. In fact, Harrow is one of the best boroughs in London in terms of the process. We have also held a number of online webinars to answer the many questions and concerns that residents may have, and community leaders are working hard to allay those fears that residents may have. Those working in local government have a keen appreciation of the lives of individuals and communities, and I am proud of the way that the council responded to the pandemic. Despite the pressures on already overloaded services, they haven't hidden away from the enormity of the challenges faced by the pandemic. They have been there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for over 11 months, and our messaging that has come from public health has been consistent. At the online meeting in July last year, we spoke about some of the extraordinary efforts people went to ensure residents could be protected in the first wave, but still the pandemic continued. Sean Harris, as our Chief Executive, and often supported by Carol Furlong as Director of Public Health, has given regular updates at our monthly online cabinet meetings around the impact of the virus, set out how the council was responding and work taking place across the public sector to ensure services kept going, and also around the rollout of the vaccine. We've now had over 11 months working in a fast-paced crisis situation, making decisions at speed, working long hours and solving really difficult issues in our communities, whether that be shielding the supply of PPE or managing test and trace via local outbreaks, getting people safely out of hospital, enforcement, guidance, cleaning streets and collecting bins. The list is endless, and the work continues, and I think from what's been said over the last few days, this will be for some time yet. The pressure on the council has been relentless, and we will talk about that when we discuss the budget later this evening. I want to take this time to talk about the massive ongoing pressure on our residents and communities. Nationally, over 135,000 people have died from COVID. In Harrow, over 637 Harrow residents have died, the third highest mortality rate from COVID in London. 637 lives tragically lost, family members who have still not been able to mourn, who are still struggling to come to terms with their grief. I therefore welcome and fully support the Mayor's announcements that we will commemorate those people by planting 21 trees in Harrow, a lasting memory to all those who have been affected by COVID in Harrow. The future has many challenges, and it is simplistic and misleading to portray Harrow as a borough of abundant wealth when it is home to so much deprivation. COVID has shone a spotlight on the many different health inequalities and also the effects of digital exclusion on low-income communities. Families on low incomes are at rock bottom. Resilience was always in short supply and it is now non-existent. Options to stay afloat are dwindling. These are families who have been exhausted by any limited savings they may have had. They've used up favours from families and friends. These are people who pre-COVID were running successful businesses, working in the gig economy, self-employed, those in low paid and precarious jobs. Furlough has helped many, but many others have not had any financial support throughout COVID, and they remain without hope. Through calls received, I've received emails and online meetings and volunteering across the borough, I've seen myself the growing levels of poverty that people are living in. I've seen the growing demand coming through the community hub, the London Community Kitchen and the voluntary sector. For those who are not aware, at the beginning of the pandemic, a strong partnership approach was developed between Harrow Council and Harrow Voluntary and Community Sector organisations, including the London Community Kitchen, who set out to supply food to Harrow residents on the statutory shielded list, and also through support hubs around the borough to those most in need. Their volunteers have done an amazing job with over 750 tonnes of food distributed to Harrow residents, and over 155,000 meals distributed over 7 months during the pandemic. Job support, mental health support, support for heating, support with clothing have all been attempted to be provided. As we start to come to the end of the pandemic, the bulk foods support is anticipated to fall off, which will lead to a large gap between the food available and the need required. A number of volunteers that rose during the pandemic reduces as people return to work. We've all seen how much the government has spent during COVID. The huge amounts on contracts like track and trace, £22 billion, PPE contracts that are being investigated by the courts, but frontline public services have not been publicly funded. As Nelson Mandela once said, and it's still true today, put starkly, we have a situation in which the further accumulation of wealth, rather than contributing to the improvements of the equality of life of all humanity, is generating poverty at a frighteningly accelerated pace. This Labour administration are not waiting for government to act. We will be fighting for a better future for our residents and businesses. In the budget debate, we will set out the many amazing things the council has done during the pandemic, the challenges we face and how we respond to them, and also what we're doing to aid the recovery in Harrow. In the few minutes I have left, I want to set out what we are doing with our partners across London and the rest of the country. We are building strong partnerships and friendships across the public and community sector. Working together, we will look to ensure Harrow does recover. Sean Harris, as Chief Executive, has ensured our voice is heard across London and government. Working with the West London boroughs and the NHS, we are developing a build and recover plan which provides a framework for addressing economic recovery from the pandemic at the sub-regional level in West London, supplementing and complementing activity undertaken at borough level. We're looking to protect and create thousands of good jobs, secure better alignment of existing public sector funds and attracting new private and public sector investment, understand and address inequalities, provide timely and good quality employment support and skills provision, drive innovation in better green recovery, revive the UK economy as part of London's overall contribution. And already we are looking at 9,000 people to be supported on the Extend Work and Health programme, integrated into existing employment support, provision across boroughs, further education skill providers to benefit participants and business. Alignment of employment support and skill systems at a sub-regional level with a specific focus on BAME equality. Development of a strategic and place-based West London plan with buy-in already from businesses, skill providers, universities and the NHS in support of growth sectors, innovation clusters, anchor institutions, micro businesses and entrepreneurs, town centres. A green recovery roadmap linked to London's Recovery Board's Green New Deal mission, and we have seen the success of that with recent grant bids. Plan in place for improved digital and transport connectivity, which reflects new remote working patterns and business needs. Case made to government for additional investment to support skills development and infrastructure, including specifically in relation to aviation communities due to the impact on Heathrow. When I was elected as leader 3 years ago, the message I gave at that time was one of determination, optimism and confidence, because I knew that when this council is united, when we utilise the many talents that we have within this online chamber, across the council and our partner organisations, when we are all working together, we can make a real difference to our citizens' lives. So many of our residents need us now, and we must ensure that they receive the support and help that they desperately need. The vaccine does not help, the vaccine does give people hope that the pandemic can be controlled, and we will do all we can to give people that hope of a brighter future. I would like to finish with a quote from Barack Obama that is so relevant to us now. Hope is not blind optimism. It's not ignoring the enormity of the task ahead or the roadblocks that stand in our path. It's not sitting on the sidelines or shirking from a fight. Hope is that thing inside us that insists despite all the evidence to the contrary, that something better awaits us if we have the courage to reach for it and to work for it and to fight for it. Hope is the belief that destiny will not be written for us, but by us, by the men and women who are not content to settle for the world as it is, who have the courage to remake the world as it should be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Please conclude it. Thank you very much. Well on time. Okay. Any members have questions on what the leader has talked about? Paul was one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And can I join with the leader in just paying tribute to the work the staff have done over the year. It's been truly impressive to see, and I know they've all been working very hard. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the volunteers across Harrow who've been helping out, and also the businesses that have had to keep running, the people who've had to go out and face these dangers to give us the services that we all rely on. But you, Mr. Leader, you at the end of your speech gave this great quote from Obama about what you should do and how you should fight and how you should do. I'd like, if I can, to ask you specifically to set out one or two things that you are doing and the council is doing, not from the government's schemes, but the council, to support local businesses recover from COVID.
Leader.
It's probably because, thank you, Paul. It's probably because our funding has been cut away in the last 5 years. Our revenue support grant's been cut by over 50 million pounds. So we're reliant on bidding into grant funding that's available through the voluntary, mainly through the government, but there's also our revenue streams as well that we're bidding into, and we're getting very adept at doing so. But what we're looking to do for businesses, there's a lot around training and support to train people into new jobs that are coming available. We're trying to work across West London about the number of people who have been affected by the Heathrow crisis. We can't do it on our own, so we're working with universities to start bringing more training into the borough. We've been successful, and you'll find out it's in the budget as well, but we've been successful around some of the other loans that have come forward on the Green Deal loans that we've been successfully bidding for. We also bid into the apprenticeship schemes to try and sort of just been to large companies so they can be separated out into smaller companies. We are doing a lot, but to be honest, we can't do it on our own. We need a government that's prepared to invest into public services to enable us to exit the pandemic in a positive way.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I have a supplementary? Thank you.
Yes, please.
I have to say, Mr. Mayor, President Obama's quote would have been slightly less impressive if it had been, hope is we'll blame the government, hope is we'll bid for some more things, hope is we'll hope someone else does something. If you listen to what you said yourself, that's not what you should be doing. What you should be doing is leading. What you should be doing is having a vision. What you should be doing is doing what you can to help the businesses of Harrow. So I'll ask you directly, will you support our proposal to have 1 hour's free parking for a year in Harrow to enable businesses to get back on their feet?
Leader.
It's been proven a number of times that free parking is not what drives recovery for businesses. What we does need is a government that's more open and transparent about how it operates. And maybe we need a different government, to be honest, because the simple point is, a lot of these businesses have taken out loans. The government told them to take out loans to recover, and now they've got to start paying them back. There's no discussion yet about the business rates going forward, about the business rates holiday. There's no thing about the grants. They said, oh, it's £400 million, but no one knows what the detail is. And there's this constant stuff about the government slowly responding. Big businesses are okay, not the small entrepreneurs in Harrow.
Thank you. Next question is in Marilyn, please, Marilyn.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Leader. Leader, I am disappointed at your negative comments in your presentation. The government has been one of the most generous in the world to help people through this crisis. And wouldn't you agree that the vaccine programme is successful, no thanks to Sir Keir Starmer, who wanted to sign up to the EU vaccine rollout, but because this government had the foresight to invest in vaccines and actually order enough of them. And that's the reason why many of us have had the benefit of the protection. That will save lives. So would you not agree that actually the government's done an excellent job in that respect?
Leader, please.
No, I totally disagree. I think they were right on buying the vaccine and investing into it. We've now got 5 times the number we need, but where is it? That's the question, is the first question. But I think the credit has really got to go to the NHS, because I've worked across Northwest London when they've been working on trying to find the properties available. The number of GPs that are coming in to help, but it's the army of volunteers that are stepping in. And if you actually go to the vaccination centre and sit there and work there for a day as a volunteer, you'll see the amount of work those people are putting into it. It's that community spirit of stuff that's coming through. And whilst quite a few people have been the first jab, we've got to worry about the second one, and we've got to make sure it goes forward. But the government was right to buy the stuff in the first place, but I wouldn't give them the credit of trying to organise it. So the way that the amount of extra time that's been put in by council officers as well, which I have seen, that they're the ones who should take the credit for the implementation of trying to get people contacted and drawn into vaccination centres.
Thank you. Supplementary, please.
Yeah. Yes, I do have a supplementary question. I don't think you answered the part about Sir Keir Starmer's attitude towards this. You see, if we'd have had him in charge, we would have gone along with the European proposal, and they're struggling to get vaccines at all. Meanwhile, we're leading the world, apart from Israel, which is at the top of the tree. We're leading the world on vaccinating our people and saving lives. I'm astonished, actually, at what you've said. So would you not agree that it would have been a really big mistake to do what the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition suggested and go along with the EU's proposal? Because they are struggling to get hold of the vaccines. And actually, we're not. We're doing rather well because this government dealt with it correctly.
Leader, please.
We agree to differ, Marilyn. But you've read all the facts and you come to your own interpretation.
Thank you. Next is Richard Almond. Richard, please.
I do read the facts, but you don't.
Richard, please.
Thank you. First, Leader, if you need another government, you need a different electorate. Anyway, when you mentioned the vaccine at the beginning of your statement, you acknowledged scientists, the NHS and volunteers. Why couldn't you bring yourself to acknowledge the pharmaceutical giants without whose capital strength, manufacturing and logistical ability we'd never have had the vaccine in the first place?
Leader, please.
I did mention the scientists, but it's not just it's not these pharmaceutical giants working together. It's also around universities and places of learning that has also brought expertise into it. I only get 10 minutes, and if I wanted to list all the people involved with vaccines, it'd take me even longer, but I do appreciate that they have made a contribution to make sure that it is developed and distributed.
You're evading my question, Leader. You mentioned scientists, the NHS and volunteers, which I said in my question. You did not make any mention of the pharmaceutical companies without which we'd never have had the vaccine in the first place. And this is a pattern of mean-minded behaviour towards anybody other than the public sector, which we saw in your motion last July, when until I mentioned people who'd worked in the private sector, including the supermarkets, which your colleague Councillor Palmer generously acknowledged. There's no acknowledgement from anybody on your side of anybody other than the public sector doing any good whatsoever. Why this mean-minded spirit on your part?
Leader, please.
It's your fascination with the private sector, really. You know, there is a purpose of the private sector and the public sector, but in reality, our health, National Health Service, is a public sector service. The speech tonight and what I was contributing about is about Harrow. I don't have no influence around some of these large organisations. I don't know where you get this fixation around all these companies that aren't even in Harrow. If it's a company in Harrow, when Glaxo's, all that are in down the road in Ealing, that's another thing. But we're here talking about Harrow Council and the work that people have done in Harrow to make sure the people in Harrow have been vaccinated. Why you want to bring in private companies and equity, well, we're probably just selling it off, but why you want to bring them in is sort of it's taken away from the work that these people have done.
Exactly.
Thank you, Leader. Unfortunately, we ran out of the time. Sorry, Stephen, we don't have time for your question. Thank you very much. Next item, we are dealing with item number 7 to item number 11. In relation to item 8 to 11, can I ask that you have regards to the February Cabinet reports, the sections on equalities and equality impact assessments, and the results of the budget consultation. I call on Leader to move the recommendations item number 7 to 11 of the summons. Leader.
I move all of the recommendations contained in items number 7 to 11, I think, are set out in the summons, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to the borough plan?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Osborne, would you like to move the amendments to the budget, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to formally move that amendment.
Thank you. Is there a seconded, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. I now call on the Leader to commence the debate in accordance with the procedural motion agreed at item number 3.1. I have a list of notified speakers. Leader, please. We got 20 minutes for the Labour group and 20 minutes for the Conservative group. I'm not going to time in between. So when it's 19 minutes, I'm going to say 1 minute left. So Leader, please.
Just switching the microphone on. I'm just switching the microphone on, Mr. Mayor. Sure.
Okay.
Whilst the pandemic has been and will continue to be hugely challenging, it has also been inspirational seeing how we, councillors and staff, residents, community groups and businesses have pulled together to support one and all through such turbulent times. The cost of the pandemic will have a lasting impact to our local economy, to our NHS, to our people. The pandemic has placed enormous burdens on council budgets, not just for the past 12 months, but into the future as well. And the budget report tonight sets out those pressures and how the council will look to respond. I want to make it quite clear, Harrow Council is not failing. For our amazing staff and this Labour administration, it is succeeding in doing amazing things, despite underfunding. It is, however, being failed. We're pleased that the government has listened to our calls to provide compensation for income losses and extra funding. A longer term approach would provide much more stability for essential local services. However, it is really disappointing the government hasn't done more to support councils in the settlement offer after such a difficult year, which have pushed themselves to the limits to help residents and businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. I am disappointed that this 1 year settlement for local government means we can only plan for the next year and gives us no long-term certainty over our services or finances. It is outrageous that the government is ploughing ahead with plans to hit workers in their pockets by hiking council tax by 5%, freezing pay for the many key workers on the front line and slashing universal credit in the middle of the pandemic. How quickly this Conservative government have forgotten those people, those heroes who quickly stood up when the COVID hit, who carried on whilst government dithered, and who have been cast aside like the scraps off a plate as we start coming out of a pandemic. And as I said earlier, it can't be forgotten that the COVID crisis has come after a decade of funding reductions for local authorities, which had already led to unsustainable pressures. The Conservative government wasted taxpayers' money, handing billions in contracts to their friends, wasted hundreds of millions on PPE that the NHS couldn't use, and spent £22 billion of taxpayers' money on a test and trace system that failed time and time again. But they can't find the money to support families and key frontline services. We have more people than ever claiming council tax support. We have an increase in residents who are homeless or threatened with homelessness. We have seen a rise in the number of residents who are furloughed or unemployed, rises in the number of vulnerable adults needing social care support, and worryingly, we have seen significant increases in the number of children on safeguarding alerts. Why are councils, right on the front line of the fight against COVID, being made to beg for £2 billion to avoid bankruptcy, a small amount when compared to the billions spent elsewhere? We will continue to make the case for proper long-term investment in local services, which is pivotal for securing the ambitious and inclusive recovery we all want to see. We're not seeking to play Canute, but the budget has to be realistic and deliverable. And the budget and borough plan tonight sets out what we can do within limited financial constraints. A huge chunk of our budget is spent on looking after children and the elderly, and we will continue to focus our resources that keep people safe. This work won't make headlines, but it will make a massive difference to people's lives, helping children who've had a really tough start in life, looking after our older residents. These are your neighbours who live alone and need help to get dressed in the morning, or your gran or family whose child has complex physical needs that means that they need carers to help them to do tasks most of us take for granted. I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank Dawn, Sean, CSB and all their teams for the work they have done to ensure that we can still deliver services that our residents and businesses desperately need. It has not been easy and gets harder every year. This Labour administration is committed to putting residents first, and I'd like to remind you all of just some of the things we have done to support our residents over the past 10 months, and the speakers who follow will set out plans for the future. Together, working with our partners in Harrow, we have built a community hub that has made nearly 28,000 calls out to vulnerable residents, organising and delivering over 6,500 food parcels. At one point, we had 350 extra children and child protection plans. Our adult social care services has been working flat out to support Harrow's care homes and as well as people in their own homes. We couldn't wait for government, so implemented exceptional measures in securing supplies of PPE for care homes and our own frontline staff. Installed solar panels on 14 Harrow schools and agreed plans to have solar panels fitted on the depot. Secured a Green Homes grant to retrofit 50 low-income households with energy-saving measures. Housed 22 rough sleepers in emergency accommodation and worked towards offering them better long-term housing solutions. Plan to vaccinate the homeless and shared accommodation are in place with the CCG. The Integrated Learning Disability Services continue to provide clinical and practical support to people with learning disabilities who are very vulnerable to coronavirus and has protected so many during the pandemic. The DfE have commented about Harrow's Children's Services, commended Harrow's Children's Services for its resilience during the time of the emergency. Secured an additional £463,000 to increase provision of ESSO, Skills in for Life, ICT and employability courses. Created a £600,000 emergency fund to support local community projects helping vulnerable residents. Invested in increased street cleaning. Ran a digital version of Harrow's Heroes, our flagship community event, celebrating the hard work and dedication of local people. And in the middle of all this, we had Brexit. We are concerned about the supply of workers and the impact this will have in social care and construction. We're building affordable homes and council homes, developed an out-of-hospital recovery plan signed off by all key partners based upon a deeper integration of services. Adult social care has delivered all hospital discharges alongside community partners throughout the emergency period, with the team being available 7 days a week. Public health have been at the forefront of the council response to COVID, implementing test, track and trace in the local area, giving advice on the safe reoccupation of office space and reassurance to the workforce, both on an individual level and at a systems level, as well as overseeing all deliveries and distribution of PE for Harrow frontline staff. Supported schools to remain open throughout lockdown for vulnerable and key worker children. We have maximised the use of tools and powers on enforcement inclusive of closure powers where vulnerable people are being exploited. Environmental health operated COVID patrols within the borough 7 days a week. Days of action continue to be carried out in hotspot areas with police and homeless charities. Kickstart programme with strong cross-partner support, offering work placement opportunities for almost 70 young people from Harrow. Submitted bids to the Future High Street Fund to create affordable workspace and digital infrastructure. The Mayor said I need to start winding up at this moment, so I have so much more I could say, but it would take to finish. So what I'd finish with, this is about values, not money, but what is at the heart of what you believe. It's quite right that we must seize this moment to address the deep inequalities and injustices in our beautiful borough. We need to provide opportunities and hope to all our residents. We need to support our residents into good jobs that are properly paid. We must reduce poverty and health inequalities within our borough. This is about a vision to make Harrow the best place to grow up in and the best place to grow old in. We can't leave people behind. Despite adversity, this administration and this council has delivered. I am confident that the budget we are putting forward tonight is robust, realistic and achievable. It will allow us to come out of the other side of this pandemic with no one being left behind. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Adam, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Now, Mr. Mayor, a year ago, I stood up in the council chamber to talk about a new disease that was a serious cause of concern. And the past year has been extraordinary and devastating. None of us could have imagined that since that point, over 4 million people would test positive for COVID-19, and that 120,000 people in the UK, over 500 in Harrow, would tragically lose their lives. I couldn't be prouder of the work that our teams across the council and our partners in the public and voluntary sectors have done to support residents through this crisis. Now, Councillor Ahmed wants me to mention the private sector, and I thank them too. They played their part in responding to this crisis. But this is the council meeting of Harrow Council, and tonight is about our council staff, our NHS and police colleagues, our voluntary sector partners and our community volunteers, and that is who I will be focusing my thanks on tonight. And here's why. A year ago, we didn't have enough laptops for our own council staff to work from home, never mind to educate Harrow's children remotely. Despite that, our teams stepped up, going above and beyond, distributing grants to businesses and families suffering hardship, setting up our community hub to support those shielding and in need, working with the NHS to provide a seamless health and social care crisis response, and playing a vital role in COVID-19 testing, track and trace, and of course, vaccinations. We're working closely with the NHS. We are the leading borough across the whole of London. Of course, that work comes with a price tag. When we passed our 2020 budget last year, we knew we were facing a cavernous £23 million financial gap over the next 2 years. And with COVID, the pressures on our budgets have only grown. Not only have we seen a huge increase in costs, with more spending on social care, test and trace, and increased council tax support, we've also seen a major reductions in our income, whether through lower council tax collection and business rates or lower receipts from fees and charges. And despite this, for the 5th time, I am delighted to present this council with a balanced budget, one that doesn't cut frontline services and doesn't make use of our financial reserves. That's not something that can be said for every council. We saw just recently the tragedy of Croydon Council issuing 2 bankruptcy notices, a result directly of the cuts the government has imposed on them over just too many years. And it's not just them. There are at least 12 councils of all political colours are in discussions with the government to avoid issuing similar declarations. If ever there was any doubt of the value of local services, surely this pandemic has put those to bed. The key workers that we applauded last May, those were more often than not council workers. And yet, year after year, councils are left with devastating uncertainty about the future of their finances. And that means they cannot make the investments in local services that are so badly needed by everyone. Now, here in Harrow, we've taken tough decisions for many, many years to deal with a £50 million cut in our government grant. But those decisions mean that now we can invest in our residents' most important priorities, the ones laid out in our borough plan, to tackle inequality, to provide affordable housing, keep our schools great and our streets clean and safe. In this budget, we'll tackle low pay ensuring our staff and our contractors are paid the real living wage. We're making good on the motion I put to this council in November with real investments that will lead to some of our lowest paid staff and contractors getting a pay rise, because that's what a Labour council does. We'll invest in reducing our carbon footprint, doing our bit to fight climate change by investing in renewable energy and electric charging points. We'll protect the most vulnerable by freezing council tax for people claiming council tax support. And we'll make good on our promises at the council meeting last summer by investing in equalities and diversity at the council. We acknowledge the debt we owe to our Black and ethnic minority communities, and we'll work to right the wrongs of the past. Now, one of the most difficult parts of reaching a balanced budget this year is the 5% rise in council tax. And I want to be absolutely clear that the decision and choice to use rises in council tax to fund local services is a choice made by Rishi Sunak in Whitehall. And it's not me saying this. The non-partisan House of Commons Library explained it this way. The government announced that local government spending power would rise by 4.5%. That's what was needed, according to the government, to fund local services. They then go on to say that some 87% of this increase would come from increases in council tax. And that's absolutely reflected by the Local Government Association as well, which is a cross-party association. It said it's good that the spending review provides a potential increase of 4.5% of core spending power to support these vital local services to the cross-party LGA. However, this assumes council tax bills will rise by 5% next year, which will place a significant burden on households. Mr. Mayor, we agree with the LGA. It does place a significant burden on households. And as Keir Starmer has said, we believe that raising council tax is the wrong tax to use to fund local services. And that's why we think it's completely wrong that the Chancellor chose to use council tax to fund local services instead of funding them properly. Mr. Mayor, we've managed to reach a balanced budget position while still investing in resident priorities. But we can see that the path ahead is not at all easy. And we can still see from this budget that there are significant financial gaps ahead unless the government takes action to solve some of those major issues that have caused trouble for local government finance for many years, not least of proper reform of social care funding, something that's been promised time and time again by this Prime Minister. Mr. Mayor, I'm proud that despite all the challenges we've faced, despite the budget gaps we already had, despite the impact of COVID-19 and everything that we've had to do and have proudly done to tackle it, that we've got to a balanced budget position, investing in some of our most important priorities. And that's why I commend this budget to the Council.
Thank you, Adam. Now, just give me a second, please. Okay, Paul Osborne, please. Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's amazing how different things are to 1 year ago. Last year, we met in person. This year, we are meeting virtually. Last year, we were all in the council chamber. This year, it lies deserted and we are all at home. Last year, we were worrying about Brexit. This year, Brexit is done with a trade deal signed. Last year, Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, with more people preferring don't know to him as Prime Minister. This year, Keir Starmer is leader of the Labour Party, with more people preferring don't know to him as Prime Minister. Last year, Jeremy Corbyn was a Labour MP. This year, he doesn't have the Labour whip. So, Mr. Mayor, lots of things are different. It's been a really tough year. COVID has taken a real toll on everyone. Lots of people have lost their lives, or those of family and friends. Lots of people have, despite unprecedented government support, have lost their livelihoods. And all of us have been separated from friends and loved ones for large parts of the year. As I said earlier, I would like to pay tribute to council staff for their incredible hard work that they've done over the last year. I would also like to pay tribute to Harrow residents who've stepped up and answered the call and helped out their communities. Thankfully, there is hope at the end of the tunnel, with the speed of the vaccine rollout, with Harrow leading the way. But there are lots of things, Mr. Mayor, that still remain the same. Not least, you, Mr. Mayor, are still mayor, which is not something many people have ever seen, to do 2 budgets. What a fun you must be having. Last year, the council's regeneration scheme was failing. This year, the council's regeneration scheme continues to fail and fall behind schedule. Last year, we hadn't started building a new civic centre. This year, we still haven't started building a new civic centre. Mr. Mayor, the only person in Harrow who's seen any benefit from regeneration is Councillor Ferry, who has managed to generate himself a new job. Councillor Swirsky's grand commercialisation plans last year weren't delivering anything, and I'm sad to say, Mr. Mayor, once again, those commercialisation plans aren't generating anything. Last year, Councillor Henson was blaming the government for everything and saying the council had no choice but to do what it was doing. This year, Councillor Henson is blaming the government and saying the council has no choice to do everything that it's doing. And once again, we have a Labour budget that has huge gaps for future years. They had a £20 million gap last year. This year, we still have a £20 million gap. Last year, we didn't really have a corporate plan or a borough plan. This year, we don't really have a corporate plan or a borough plan. What we have is a draft plan that's unchanged since November and that only contains passing references to COVID and how to recover from COVID. What we have, Mr. Mayor, is a budget that doesn't do anything to help Harrow recover from COVID. But rather than just criticise, Mr. Mayor, we think it's important to put forward some suggestions. So I am putting forward an amendment to help the residents of Harrow and to help the businesses of Harrow. First of all, we will introduce 1 hour's free parking across the borough. This will help shops and businesses get back on their feet. This will encourage people to go to our town centre and to go to our district centres. It will encourage residents to shop local. We have been very prudent in how we've estimated the cost of this, taking a much more pessimistic assumption than the Section 151 officer set out, and we are confident it can be afforded for 1 year. We are proposing a fund to support the town centre and district centres to help bring people into those centres. We want to encourage street markets. We want to encourage and support the building of a cafe culture. We want to support alfresco dining. In short, Mr. Mayor, we want to do things to support the town and district centres. We know that they face huge challenges, both the challenges they've had in terms of being closed for a number of months and the challenges they face with online retail and other things taking over. And we need to make our town centre and our district centres more attractive and more likely to get people to go as a destination. But Mr. Mayor, we also want to crack down on fly tipping, and we have a number of proposals to try and do that. First of all, we want to set up a task force to try and deal quickly and speedily with fly tipping incidents, but also to have an enforcement element within that to crack down on the people doing the fly tipping and to put in place measures to stop it happening in future. We want to crack down on illegal HMOs and beds in sheds. We know that that contributes to fly tipping because people don't have a refuge service and therefore dump their rubbish across the borough. We believe if we crack down on these things, it will have a real impact on the residents of Harrow and the streets of Harrow. Mr. Mayor, we also want to get rid of the hated low traffic neighbourhoods. We have seen more uproar and more concern from residents on this issue than I think anything else that the council has done in a number of years. But we still recognise there is a problem that needs to be dealt with. So we have put money aside to deal with speeding cars and to deal with problems and to help residents, but without building walls and without dividing communities. Mr. Mayor, we want to lead. We don't just want to blame other people the whole time. We want to do things to help. Mr. Mayor, if the Labour Party doesn't want to help anyone, if the Labour Party doesn't want to do anything other than blame the government, if the Labour Council won't lead, they should step aside and let us get on with it. And the first thing they should do, Mr. Mayor, is vote for this amendment and actually do some things to help the people of Harrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Pritesh Patel, please. Pritesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I think we can all agree that last year has been one of the most difficult years any of us has had to face in our professional and personal lives. COVID-19 has left no group unscathed. The virus has had a terrible impact on our communities, our culture, and our council. The strain and cost generated by the pandemic has pushed governmental organisations to the edge of their capacity. This has, of course, had an effect on the council's budget, and as a result, has meant that our amendment has not been able to have as far-reaching scope as we would have liked in a normal year. Even so, we hope residents will see from our amendment that Conservative councillors put the improvement of everyday services at the forefront of our agenda. We had hoped that the Labour budget might have contained some vision for post-COVID recovery of Harrow. We thought that might even invoke the government's mantra of build back better, or even the council's slogan of building a better Harrow. But sadly, and as usual, the Labour budget is lacking in vision, does not deliver a better, more prosperous Harrow, and of more concern, fails to listen to residents' concern. It is shocking to learn that the council plans to spend a further £328,000 on their failed LTN schemes. These ill-conceived roadblocks have caused chaos and consternation for thousands of local people. We cannot understand why Labour leadership thinks spending even more taxpayers' money on these ill-fated schemes is a good idea. It is frankly an insult to the residents. It is time to let residents take back control of their streets and neighbourhoods. We need to move these schemes. We need to remove these schemes, go back to the drawing board, and start again while consulting residents every step of the way. We see yet again in this budget that Labour administration has chosen to increase council tax by the maximum amount. Just on Wednesday in Parliament, Sir Keir Starmer quite rightly said, "Now is not the time for tax rises for families." I can only assume that Sir Keir's memo didn't make it onto the Councillor Henson's and Councillor Sawerski's desk. I could forgive our local Labour councillors, of course, for missing their leader's memo, as Sir Keir really has struggled to make any memorable contributions or impacts in his recent months. This theme of poor communication in the Labour ranks is quite widespread. On Monday, Harrow Labour Party tweeted, "We shouldn't face higher taxes. Fight the Conservative council tax rip-off," they said. I think Councillor Sawerski needs to break the news to whoever runs Labour's Twitter account that it is Labour that have been running the council for a number of years. Harrow Labour have chosen, and yes, it was their choice, to increase council tax. Not only have they increased it, but as always, they have increased it by the maximum amount possible. Labour have done this every year they have been in power since 2010. The only year council tax wasn't increased in Harrow was in 2014 when we were in power. Last year, we proposed to reduce the increase in council tax. Harrow Labour voted against it. We have heard and will no doubt hear the usual excuses of how all the council's financial woes is solely the fault of the Conservative government. We have heard and will hear how the council is underfunded and does not get their fair settlement from the government. Mr. Mayor, while these excuses may sound convincing on the face of it, I'm sure residents would be interested to know that the council received 360 million in non-COVID grants from the government in the financial year 2020-21. In addition to this, the council also received 121 million in COVID emergency funding. This means for the last financial year, Harrow Council received 481 million in combined grants from central government. Only a small proportion of these grants received were mentioned in the reports presented to us today. It's no coincidence that these figures were hidden from public scrutiny until requested by the Conservative councillors. This is typical of a Labour administration not being fully transparent with finances and to portray a negative picture to suit their political agenda. I think most members of the public would agree that the government has hardly been tight-fisted when it comes to this council, and the Labour cabinet's repeated claims of underfunded is a very bad joke, usually made, quite literally, at the expense of residents. Of course, there is no mention of money wasted in pursuit of Labour's failed commercialisation projects. A majority of the commercialisation projects have failed to generate any form of income whatsoever. Most of them have been shelved at a significant cost and loss to the taxpayer, whilst others have been discreetly removed from the budget to save further embarrassment. This is nothing short of scandalous. It is time that local people had a council budget that puts residents first. A budget which provides 1 free-hour parking to encourage residents to support our embattled high streets. A budget which provides a street cleaning task force to tackle the blight of fly tipping and littering which plagues our borough. A budget which invests in our town centre and helps it adapt to the post-COVID world. And a budget which creates a planning enforcement task force who will crack down on beds in sheds and illegal HMOs. These are the real issues which matter to Harrow residents. These are issues which are poorly addressed in Labour's budget. Harrow deserves better and needs a budget which will allow us to build back better. I urge Council to vote for our budget amendment, which put Harrow residents first, invests in services which will improve everyday lives. Mr. Mayor, I'm therefore happy to second the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Pritesh. Marilyn, please, next one. You go 5 minutes, Marilyn.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, to be clear, the Conservatives in Harrow are not running Harrow Council. So these amendments are amendments to the Labour budget. These amendments send out a strong message that if we had control of Harrow's finances, the budget would reflect our philosophy and would benefit the residents and businesses of Harrow, who are, after all, our customers. It is our job to make life better for them and take note of their needs. On examining the budget, we have identified pots of money that are achieving nothing. For example, there is over £300,000 stashed away that has been earned on the back of prosecutions for proceeds of crime. This is, of course, evidence of successful prosecutions and all credit for winning these important cases against those who have profited from unauthorised developments over many years. However, what good does it do if we don't put this to good use to tackle many of the unauthorised HMOs and beds and sheds, something that many of our residents complain about? Using the money gives us £163,000 a year for 2 years to create a task force to crack down on these unauthorised developments. Cracking down on beds and sheds will help with fly tipping, since these outbuildings are off the grid and therefore receive no refuse collection service. In addition, we are going to introduce 2 years of funding for street cleaning task force and a pilot scheme for a year, removing the charges for collecting mattresses and such like. We have identified a large sum which was there originally to mitigate against the risk of Harrow's many failed commercialisation projects. However, since we are no longer embarking on these projects, thank goodness, it is important that we make use of this pot of money so that we can improve on the dwindling fortunes of Harrow Town Centre, which just recently lost a key anchor store in Debenhams. It's also struck us that, and I say this respectfully, the Greenhill councillors whose ward the town centre is in appear to have stockpiled their NCIS allowance, a significant amount of money. And what use is that squirreled away and left on the shelf gathering dust? It is hard to understand why Harrow's Labour councillors don't appear to realise that we must invest in the town centre to retain its metropolitan town centre status. a status that we are clinging on to but so easily be taken away. It is true that COVID has not helped matters, but this is all the more reason why we need to invest and support our businesses and shopping centres by building back the footfall to create an attractive environment for people visiting the town centre, not because they need to, but because they want to as an outing. We are therefore proposing that we invest £120,000 in St Anne's Road in the next year in connectivity and infrastructure improvements, and a further £100,000 in designing a floor layout that would encourage desirable and pleasant alfresco dining areas and a cafe culture in order to make St Anne's Road a destination in of itself and encourage restaurants and cafes to take over some of the empty outlets. There are stacks of evidence to suggest that local councils need to show leadership here and demonstrate to investors that Harrow is open for business. Success builds on success, and if we show we have confidence in our town centre, others will have confidence too. Our amendments to the budget also include an essential boost
1 minute left.
our district town centres by introducing 1 hour free parking. And by that, we mean 1 hour will be the first hour free and won't be taken away for additional time. Last but not least, I must mention the saga of the low traffic neighbourhoods. To spend that money on this is a waste, and they should be taken away straight away. We all saw Adam Schwersky in his Facebook video. One cannot complain all the time and go on and on and on and on, whinging about not having enough funding when there is money there that we could make a difference to people's quality of life. Mr. Mayor, I endorse these sensible and fully costed amendments to the budget. It seems to us that anyone who can't support 1 hour free parking, a planning enforcement task force, removing the LTNs and putting in proper measures, a street cleaning task force, enforcement of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, improvements to St Anne's Road, funding improvements.
Please conclude.
Centres, and 1 year 1 year pilot to take away bulk waste. Next year, the Conservatives will have a chance to show
I think your time is up, Marilyn.
with fiscal management and drive and vision, and make the very most of the resources available to us. That time cannot come too soon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Marilyn. All the next speakers are going to have 3 minutes each. I'll warn you when 1 minute is left. So next one is Christine, please. Christine Robson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall try not to go on and on and on, but I am pleased to speak in support of this thoughtful budget, which is promoting the well-being of people in Harrow. And to be transparent, in this directorate, with the one-off government grants that we have been given, we have provided specific targeted support through schools to help alleviate digital disparity for children and young people working from home. And we have also directed targeted food relief programs through our schools, with whom, as you know, we have a strong working partnership. Harrow schools throughout the pandemic have just kept going, even when it seemed at times in the past the government had kind of forgotten them. They thought there was a sort of child-minding service called Children's Schools, it seemed at one point, but they have stayed steady and sturdy, ready to take on new tasks, however diverse, and like us, ready to make sense of last-minute government directives and guidance, sometimes first heard of on the morning news on the radio, like this morning, I think. But the funds that have been available to us are short-term one-offs. In social care, we've used a carefully monitored programme of virtual and face-to-face contacts to maintain close links with families. We have successfully bid for short-term one-off amounts of money to improve our offer to families, but these are curtailed and threatened by lack of long-term government thinking. Everyone has worked very hard, even with 7-day weeks, but they've remained resourceful and wanting to plan for the future. We've never stopped doing that. However, the pressure on the system can only increase. Already, We have increased referrals and increased numbers of children on child protection
1 minute
plans.
left.
And the presentations are of increased complexity. And this is a reflection of the world children and young people face, and recovery will be slow and difficult. Pressure on resources in the future will be significant with such increased need. But we are a compassionate council, and our essential task is to prioritise safeguarding both physical and emotional through prevention and treatment that meets the needs of children, young people and their families. This is our corporate responsibility. There should be good, thoughtful, long-term government planning for proper financial provision, not one-offs, so that we can plan long-term to support people. The families that we support deserve this. And I would just like to mention that there is no shortage of informed vision here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Conclude, please. Thank you. Well in time. Next one is Anjana, please. Anjana Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to speak in favour of the Conservative budget amendment. This amendment gives a hint at what Conservative Council would do to better the lives of Harrow residents. We propose extra strict cleaning to help tackle the problem of fly tipping. Not a week goes by where there is not a story in local paper or on social media showing a large fly tip. We believe this issue needs to be addressed directly by an extra task force, which can support our existing street cleaning teams. To further support our campaign to keep Harrow clean, I fully support the creation of a pilot free bulk waste collection scheme. Removing items like mattresses and sofas for free will help residents do the right thing without billing them for the extortionate charges. This should also have the effect of helping to reduce fly tipping. Harrow residents are charged one of the highest council taxes in London. It is about time that council gives back a service without billing local people further. I find it incredible that the council plans to spend over £150,000 on installing ANPR cameras to enforce the deeply flawed and divisive low traffic neighbourhoods. Perhaps even worse is the £172,000 Labour will spend to operate these cameras. Enough is enough. It is clear residents do not want their street blocked up, nor do they want expensive cameras installed all over the borough. You have already wasted hundreds of thousands of pounds to install these schemes.
1 minute
all
left.
of these cost taxpayers' money. As per usual, we have heard blame for all the council's troubles being pinned on Conservative government, which the council leader and Councillor Sawowski did it very, very beautifully, and the usual cries of the council being underfunded. I will reiterate what my colleague, Councillor Pritesh Patel, said earlier. This council has received £481 million in COVID and non-COVID related grants from central government. Before Labour starts blaming government for this council's financial issues, perhaps they should look in the mirror. And as Councillor Osborne asked a question to the leader of the council about what have they done during the pandemic time to help the businesses and residents, he didn't have anything to say apart from they have got proposals. I urge, sorry, who is disturbing me?
It's your time over, please.
No, my time is not. I've got 3 minutes. I only just started at 1944. I've got camera here. I urge council.
Please continue.
Respect for Mr. Mayor. Respect for Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I've only just started and you're stopping me.
No,
do I continue or not?
Continue, please. Conclude it as soon as possible.
I urge council to back the Conservative budget amendment and show residents that we are putting them first Mr. Mayor, all respect to you, but I think that wasn't necessary. I do respect you.
Thank you.
Whoever was saying that should take their words back. And actually, you disturbed me. I didn't even have my full 3 minutes because I saw the other councillors spoke until 1946.
I have a timer here. Anjana, please conclude your thing. I'll allow you a little bit more.
You've timed it wrong.
Conclude it, please.
Am I going to get apology from whoever was disturbing me and saying I am not respecting the mayor?
Please. No, but conclude, please. You're eating into your time. Conclude it, please.
Yes, I was just saying that the leader of the council and Councillor Saboski has obviously failed to serve this borough, and because they can't manage their books, they're actually blaming it on the government, which is the usual tactics that they use. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Anjana. Next one is Paimana, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am speaking this evening in support of the Labour budget. When I thought about what I wanted to talk about this evening in regards to the budget, I thought about the future of children and young people in Harrow. In the face of the continued pressures from the Conservative government, I see a bleak outlook. This didn't used to be the case. When I was 7 years old, a Labour government was brought into power. I remember how the Labour government lifted families with children out of poverty. They made children like me in Harrow a priority. They brought in all sorts of policies, from Short Start to affordable childcare and more generous financial support for families with children, both in and out of work. The Labour government brought down child poverty in the UK and was congratulated for its efforts by leaders worldwide. But these efforts have been reversed by 10 years of Conservative cuts, and it seems even the COVID-19 pandemic doesn't put a stop to this ideological narrative of austerity. The hike in council tax that the Conservative government has forced on our council is yet another example of how the Conservative government wants working families across Harrow to pay for vital services, which in essence they should be funding. How much longer will the children and young people of Harrow have to suffer? We live in one of the richest countries in Europe, and yet research has shown that 50% of children live below the poverty line across our country. In December, for the first time in history, we saw UNICEF feed children in the United Kingdom, and those figures are right at our doorstep. Parents across Harrow are having to make the dilemma between heating, food, nappies, or rent. It pains me to see another generation of young people and children suffer, and it doesn't stop there. In Harrow, 7% of our working age population are claiming universal credit. That's 11,000 people. That means 7 in 10 families with children claiming universal credit have had to cut back on essentials, and more than half are behind on rent and other essential bills. Poverty for many is becoming hard to escape, trapping people in a life that's shaped by daily challenges, a loss of hope and a sense of shame that can be hard to shake off. Cutting the COVID universal credit £20 a week top up will put people into poverty. Many Harrow families are awaiting the Chancellor's statement next week just to find out if they will be able to continue to afford their rent, heating or even food. How can people sit here and listen to that and think that is acceptable? But Labour-run councils like Harrow are doing what we can. In Harrow, with these one-off grants that the government has provided, the council has been able to improve digital access to school, help with meals and other one-off activities. But these funds will soon run out. Just like the hike in council tax that the Conservative government has forced on us, the question therefore remains, how much longer will the government keep passing the bill they should be paying onto councils? We are going through one of the most difficult moments as a country, and yet the government continues to pursue a defunct economic ideology. To build back better, we need to put children and young people first. The Conservative government has not, but Harrow's Labour Council administration is doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next one is Richard. Richard Allman, please. Richard?
I noticed that the leader of the council was fascinated enough with the public sector to make a completely unsupported smear against the Conservative government of allegedly giving billions to unnamed friends. In a time of national crisis, it would be good for this borough to have a leader who can rise above the partisan and petty. Unfortunately, it clearly hasn't. The budget shows no sign of any strategy running through it, and that's not surprising. Councillor Henson told the Cabinet 2 weeks ago that Dawn and her team have put together this budget and have gone through it with Adam. Well, that's good. That's no more than our leader and frontbench spokesman have had. The council officers can provide technical know-how, and they do so superbly in many cases, toward putting together a budget. but they need strategic direction from the elected members of the administration. Instead, they've got Councillor Swirsky, who I'm told has had time to make another silly little self-regarding video, which I haven't unfortunately had time to watch, but not to pay attention enough to what's in the budget, which stands in his name, to have known that 2 tables, as pointed out to him at the same cabinet by Councillor Osborne, on costs of financing the debt conflicted with each other. Anyway, you did have a strategy, or what purported to be a strategy, 2 years ago, because you put it to the cabinet in a document entitled 2-Year Strategy. And in it, you identified 4 key themes which are meant to raise more money for the council. One was corporate and tech, and in it you only specified reviewing the treasury management function, which runs pretty well as it is actually, so there's nothing probably to be earned from that. Second, you had what you called service efficiency and savings,
1 minute
and transformation, which you lumped together. We've got a huge amount, 8.34 million, going in the capital budget into IT, but it's not aimed at any raising any money, because as your officers told ONS in December, you had no specific financial targets for that. The fourth one was in commercial investments and selling services. Well, we know the commercial investment strategy has been chucked out of the window completely, courtesy of the PWLB, which has declined to sanction more money going towards such purchases. And an example of failure to self-services, 2 years ago in your budget, you had the provision of CCTV monitoring from the non-existent so far depot extension. We've seen nothing of that. That was £200,000 supposed to be coming. It's chucked out of the budget. What you can control, your utter failures at doing.
Thank you, Richard. Next one is Simon Brown. Simon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my colleagues have highlighted how we as a Labour administration has successfully continued delivery to all our residents in spite of the problems and issues facing Harrow Council with regard to lack of sufficient funding and financial planning from central government. Councillor Maxine Henson will detail in a few minutes, nowhere is this more true than in social care. But we are continuing to provide high quality care to our most vulnerable residents, but this is becoming increasingly difficult, and the lack of any clear long-term funding plan from this government means that we are, in effect, living hand to mouth, reliant on one-off grants and having to raise an increasing amount from local council taxpayers, and this situation can't go on. I've said before, we have an ageing population, an increasing complex and multiple health conditions, and people are living longer, so it's no big surprise that our spending requirements increase. We are making good progress with our strength-based approach, our resilient Harrow, and becoming much more adept at enabling our residents to remain in their own homes. COVID has brought more problems, of course, including, of course, increasing problems around mental well-being. I'm proud of the services that we've delivered, the support we've provided, and I'm so proud and grateful to all our staff who have worked so long and so hard to achieve this. So the recent Health and Social Care Bill, White Paper, is helpful. It says firmly that all agencies in the local area should work collaboratively, and it recognises the importance and the value of work done by local authorities. Well, that's exactly what we've been doing in Harrow with success, such as the vaccine programme, working with GPs, the CCG, local hospitals, community health partners, and our local private care providers to make such a difference to the quality of care for our residents. But I am disappointed with government. They've missed the opportunity again.
1 minute left.
Thanks. Although the white paper acknowledges the pressures facing social care and the need to address long-term sustainability and reform, it doesn't actually provide any details of this. It says it will bring detailed proposals later in this year. Bated breath time again. This time last year, I asked, where is the green paper? In 2019, I said I was looking forward to the green paper. In 2018, I said, well, you get the drift. We can't afford to be back here next year in February 2022 saying, well, we wonder where the government will publish their detailed plan. We need clear and sustainable solution for our social care crisis in Harrow and nationally, and we need it now. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next one is Norman. Norman Stevenson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, we are presented tonight with a la land budget. It's not a budget for Harrow that gives the people of Harrow any hope. We haven't proposed a budget tonight because that's not our role. With our proposed amendment, which I support, we just want to show the people of Harrow and the council staff that we care about the same things as them. It's as basic as that. Councillor Swersey just earlier said he's been making real investments. Well, I mentioned La Land earlier, which I think is an apt description. This is the Labour Council who bragged literally about the millions of pounds of profit they would make by investing in business ventures. Millions may have been spent, but where is the income? Look, in this council, we have got a really good team. It's a small team, but they actually support and work hard, the officers, to promote local business and employment. And I think they need more resources personally, because I think it's so important. Whereas we had the leader tonight actually being critical of business, and that business is key to our success. Sorry to mention you again, leader, but strangely, at the start of this debate, you said this is not about value. This is about values, not money. Well, it is about money, Graham. It's about giving value for money and hope for the people of Harrow. You mentioned Barack Obama's wonderful comments on hope. The people of Harrow definitely need to be given hope. This budget gives them none. Our amendment shows that we want to give some hope to the people of Harrow, and that's what I support. Thank you.
Thank you. Maxine, please. Maxine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I would like to sincerely thank all the staff in adult social care. As a portfolio holder assistant, I was kept informed of the preparations being made in February last year to get ready for a crisis. And when the lockdown happened at the end of March, the team stepped up, working very long days, 7 days a week, to respond and keep our most vulnerable residents safe and those most in need. As Graham often says, the demand on services has been relentless. The teams faced the challenge full on and supported our residents in a positive way. Even during the short break in the summer, when the virus receded, staff were still working tirelessly to prepare for a second wave. As the country looks forward with hope that the vaccine brings with it, the pressure and demand on the teams continue. I am so proud of them all. I will never be able to express my gratitude enough. I will never forget the work they did during the pandemic and continue to do so. Thank you. However, is my time up?
You can carry on.
However, they can't continue on thanks alone. As councillors, we are fully aware of the budget cuts that have affected the council as a whole, with less resources having to be stretched even further to protect our most vulnerable residents. Over the past 10 years, social care has not been properly funded by government, with the increased costs partially being picked up by council taxpayers. Even this is not enough. The Institute for Fiscal Studies has found that councils need an estimated additional 1.6 billion by 2024-25 to fully meet the costs of adult social care. In 2021-22, we will spend an extra 6.2 million on adult social care in Harrow. The year after, we have put growth in of 3.7 million. This includes 2.5 million for extra demand, 1.3 million for more complex cases, and 1 million for provider costs. These costs have risen due to the minimum wage, which our staff deserve when supporting our residents. In 2021-22, we provide over 29,000 weeks of bedded care, residential, and at a cost of under £1,000 a week. Sorry. Over 7,000 weeks of care in supported accommodation at a cost of nearly £1,100 per week. Over 100,000 weeks of community care. This includes domiciliary care at an average cost of £260 a week. The number of mental health patients presenting to hospital emergency departments who were previously not known to services have been increasing since COVID, and this will need ongoing support towards recovery. This is becoming a serious issue, and I am seriously worried about the future and how services will be provided when year upon year our budget is decimated and hard-working staff put in under so much pressure. We urgently need funding that is consistent and meets the needs of our rising demands. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next one is Kanti. Kanti, please. Kanti Rabadia.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, we've heard a lot, and I am sort of one thing I just noticed that we're here today, and I think we all should be kind of coming together and, you know, showing hope to the residents of Harrow, showing that there is a way forward. Yes, I'm not saying anything is easy, everything is difficult and it's challenging, but they're challenging times. So I expected the leadership and, you know, the key cabinet members giving us a message of hope, unity, and the fact that gratitude is all round, not selective. Unfortunately, it's quite disingenuous of the leadership to be saying that, you know, the government hasn't given funding when, you know, plenty of funding has come through. It's also sort of, I think, a complete lack of gratitude in acknowledging that the government has got some decisions right. I acknowledge not everything was correct. But the key decision about going along the vaccination program alone is a classic example. And Councillor Assad herself, if she can recall herself tweeting to say, and I don't even think we should be using words like this, that the Conservatives do not care if we die as long as we get #Brexit. UK has opted out of EU coronavirus vaccine program. Surely the whole world acknowledges, and I'm not sure which bit we can't see, that, you know, this was a very important decision and, you know, a right decision for now as things stand. And as you rightly pointed out, a third of the residents of Harrow that were eligible are vaccinated right now. That couldn't have happened without being signed up for the EU vaccine. So I think some kind of acknowledgement does exist. Now, this amendment that's been presented by our leadership gives you some good options. And one of the reasons that I kind of also am disappointed in terms of what you're being told, and you know, there should be a lot more transparency, is the fact that we keep getting told that you know, we don't have enough budget. We know they're precious. Then I'll ask you the question, Mr. Mayor. You know this very well yourself. I don't need to explain this to you. The difference between usable and unusable reserves. Usable reserves arise because you had some kind of surplus along the lines. You cannot build reserves, depending on where you read, you know, anything from 50 million to 136 million if you didn't make a surplus. So that tells you we have been underspending the budget over many, many years, and that the leadership, you know, keeps us giving sort of smokes and mirror images of what exactly is the true nature of the finances doesn't help at all. And it is not useful in terms of planning to keep discrediting sort of government. All I heard, Mr. Mayor, was, oh, you know, the government this, the government that. Now, would you be saying that just because you don't have anything good to say about the budget being presented to us today? I wonder, but I'll leave you to answer that question. That also ponders the question that, you know, why would we not consider on our budget? And keep talking about the budget that Mr. Rishi Sunak's presenting. So, Mr. Mayor, then I still ask the question, if you're making so many good decisions, How is this council in over 400 million of debt and still being told we're under borrowing, so we expect to borrow more? We are never going to be repaying this money ever. We know that. And most of our resources are going to be financing interest and MRP, as Mr. Swirsky keeps saying. So I just don't get where we are with the finances at the moment, and a bit of transparency will help. That's why I think the right thing to do today is support the amendment to the budget, and that will be more beneficial to residents of Harrow. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your time. And I take this opportunity to acknowledge all the hard work done by everyone without excluding anyone. And I also acknowledge that a lot of our communities had hardships, and some of our councillors included have fallen victim to the dreaded virus and come out on the right side of things. And we wish and pray that everyone keeps safe. And now is not the time to be sort of trying to discredit anyone, but to be working together and showing hope to the rest of the residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Kanti. Phil O'Dell, please. Phil. Are you there, Phil?
Yep, just trying to join in, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, welcome.
Yeah, I'm speaking on the HRA budget and MTFS budget process for housing. I'm pleased to speak on housing tonight. As per the government guidelines, we are proposing to put forward a housing rent increase of CPI plus 1%. This will be challenging this year, as we see many of our tenants are suffering from coronavirus and the economic impact, but we will give them all our help we can give them so that they can help get relief in these difficult times. This draft budget also funds a very important capital programme, which has already delivered over 95 new council homes for Harrow and will deliver many more, such as those now being built on the Grange Farm Regeneration Centre site at Alexandra Avenue, Harrow, and Chichester Court, Harrow. Amongst other things, this capital programme is paying for, or will pay for, are 93 more boiler replacements for tenants, paid for 70 adaptations for tenants, progressed all the health and safety works under Home Safe 2 and deliver Home Safe 3. We are also replacing or have replaced 44 fire doors on properties above 3 stories high, and we plan to deliver 690 more safety doors on 3rd floor properties. So you can see health and safety is the top of our priority. As along with that, we also, thank you. We will also be delivering for our tenants 48 more kitchens and 48 more kitchen and bathroom improvements. This year has been tough for our tenants. We have supported our vulnerable tenants, so I commend this HRA budget to the council. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Phil. Kiran Ramchandani. Kiran, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Budgets are an expression of political priorities, and I'm delighted that we're clearly expressing our political priority this evening: decent pay, by including the money to pay the London living wage for our contractors. This is the right thing to do, and I'd like to thank Councillor Swirsky on making this happen, even with the financial pressures of the pandemic and our continued situation of being massively underfunded by the Conservative government. It takes a Labour administration to do this. Under the Tories, we get nice claps and a little praise. And even to get that, we've had to have a global pandemic. Under Labour, we get decisions that will change lives for the better. And the decision to pay all our staff, regardless of how they're employed, the London living wage, will make their lives better. And we've done this because core to our values is the commitment to fair pay. Paying people the London living wage is the best way to ensure people don't fall into poverty. The next step needs to be making Harrow a living wage borough. We know that Harrow is one of the lowest paid boroughs in London. 25% of all jobs in Harrow are paid below the London living wage. And whilst there may be many reasons for that, it's simply not right. And it's our responsibility as the local council to use any levers we have to change that. But we've made a great start by putting our own house in order under very difficult circumstances. And that's what you get with a Labour administration. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Karima, next, please. Karima? Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, I can hear. Let's carry on. Yeah.
Well, I think I don't need to speak much. I think Kiran summarized, and I think the budget is right. What Adam Swarsky, my colleague, has done. London living wage was changed in only on 2020 and 21. When Adam Swarsky was taking this to the council long time ago, we couldn't speak, we were overridden. But I'm not going to speak further. It is shame to say in 2016, I work for a kind of in a trust. If you go through them, the salary wise, the band size is only, we can't even, the frontline service people get a clap saying, oh, well done. They are the heroes of the health. They all knew that there was a pandemic happening. They raised the salary scale, the London living wage on £9, I can say £9.50 to £10.85 after 2020 to 21. So it is sad to see the Tories only know to talk the talk, not walk the walk. They better pull up their socks and understand and support our council leader and our portfolio with hardship. He has done the budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to pause it because I think everything has summarized very beautifully in this hard time. We all should understand we all are working for the community, not for ourselves. So work with the right policy and not just, I repeat, the Conservative, they're only talking, but when it comes to implement, they do not implement. They only talk the talk, not walk the walk. They don't feel the people, the grassroots levels people's heart. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I will speak about. Thank you.
Thank you. Sachin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For a decade, this Tory government has imposed austerity on this council. Financially, this has had a massive impact on services we can provide to some of Harrow's most vulnerable. This Tory government has thrown millions of people under the bus while giving multi-million-pound contracts to its mates. This is shameful. Thankfully, in Harrow, while residents have to deal with an uncaring, unthoughtful Tory government, they have a Labour council that will put their needs first. A Labour council that will shield residents from the worst of Tory cuts and tries to do the best for its residents. This budget shows the caring nature of the Labour Council, and if the Tories vote against it today, it will show they simply don't care. This budget includes additional money for adult social care. If the Tories vote against it, it will be the adults with dementia that have to pay the price as they won't get the care they need. This budget includes increases in children's social care budgets. If the Tories vote against it, it will be disabled children that will pay the price and will not get the services they require. And this budget includes one-off payments to people receiving council tax support, so they in effect don't pay the Tory government mandated increase in council tax. If the Tories vote against it, they will have to look those people in the eye and ask and tell them they won't get any extra money. In the 11th year of austerity, the budget setting gets harder and harder, but what's clear in this budget is that while the Harrow Tories just stand in a corner and moan, this Labour administration will get on with the job of protecting those most in need. I know how hard it is to set a budget, and I know how hard the budget setting process is, and I want to congratulate Adam on this budget, which puts Labour values at its heart. Next year's budget will be the hardest yet, but I'm in no doubt with Adam's hand on the tiller, he will ensure those most in need will be protected. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sachin. Varsha Parmar, please. Varsha.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The last 12 months have been difficult for all of us, but with resourcefulness, we have ensured that all statutory services continue to operate, keeping Harrow a safe and clean borough. Last month, 99.8% of bins were successfully emptied. To put this into context, it equates to over 650,000 bins lifted a month by 28 waste collection crews. As a council, we are not immune from COVID and have had many staff off isolating or shielding. Our staff sickness peaked at about 15%, with spikes in frontline services such as the refuse collection. However, we ensured that bins were always emptied and streets kept clean and safe. The impact of COVID on our budget has led to the loss of income and additional costs incurred, such as parking income, which has been severely affected because of the national lockdown, with fewer cars on the road and shops closed. Events such as filming, training and other commercial activities have also been affected due to the restrictions on movement and socialising. Our teams have helped with COVID testing, from gritting roads around the testing and vaccination centres during the snowfall, to the SMT team supporting the COVID testing scheme by delivering lateral flow test kits to schools, and some of the team who have also supported with the track and trace operation. The team have also supported transporting residents for testing. We are also preparing for the forthcoming May elections, which involve around 120 polling stations. Our COVID marshals are working with our enforcement teams to ensure that key messages are relayed to our residents and businesses as they go around the borough, ensuring that people are following the guidance given by the government. Work on other schemes have continued, such as the LTNs and the new depot, which will become operational later in the year.
1 minute left.
Thank you. I would like to thank the management team, Paul Walker, Mike Butler and colleagues, for ensuring that our services ran smoothly, and to all our staff who have gone the extra mile during this national emergency. To all our other staff across the council and for their work, and to the senior management led by Sean Harris for everything they're doing in leading the response to this difficult and challenging health emergency, working 7 days a week and very long hours. So thank you, Sean and team. As I said earlier, the council as an employer is not immune to COVID, and our thoughts are with the family of Jafar, one of our SNT drivers who sadly passed away from COVID on 27th of January, and our other colleagues who have also been personally impacted by COVID. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next one is Krishna. Krishna, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in support of this 21-22 budget. Ever since the Conservative government came to power, we as the local government and the residents of Harrow have suffered a lot with poverty, inequality and austerity. We never received a decent fund from the government and had always been cornered. All the funds were chopped off. Our support grants cut from 52 million to 1 million. With all due respect to my opposition friends, please tell your Prime Minister to value the adult services, children's services, social care, schools and national health services. All frontline services that were being clapped on Thursday and forgotten by the ministers before the end of summer. Oh gosh, all we hear is cuts, cuts, cuts. Mr. Mayor, almost every council has increased the council tax, not just Harrow, and we had no alternatives but to increase the council tax every year on year to protect the frontline services. But if we would have had the proper funds and not the cuts from this Tory government, this wouldn't have happened, Mr. Mayor. We still are struggling with community safety, with a lack of metropolitan police officers, especially during this pandemic. In the name of austerity, government funding for policing in London was cut by a third with serious consequences. And Mr. Mayor, that, hang on one second, it's shame on Tories. You have left the country in devastation. More than 130,000 citizens have died during this pandemic. Over 650 Harrow residents have died simply because you failed to take action promptly at the early stage. Mr. Mayor, our 10-year borough plan will make a huge difference to our borough to reduce the level of carbon dioxide and to promote the healthy environment by encouraging people to cycle and walk rather than drive, which will make a livelier borough. We will target those areas of poverty and health inequality that COVID shone a spotlight on, Mr. Mayor. We are not properly funded. So this is what but working with our community, we will face this challenge head on. Our opposition friends, if you want to support us, please come and stand behind us and we can make a difference to this borough. Finally, I want to take this opportunity to thank the Chief Executive and his team and our council leader, Graham Hansen, and all the cabinet members and councillors. And special thanks goes to Dawn Calvert and the finance team, and of course, our dear friend cabinet member, Adam Swashki, for this budget during this challenging time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I strongly support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is Pamela Fitzpatrick. Please, Pamela.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most people still don't fully understand the true scale of the human cost that Conservative imposed austerity has unleashed on our communities. If they did, no one with any conscience would ever vote Conservative again. Austerity is not about living within your means, it's about dismantling social protection. It's a system where the Conservative government have deliberately prevented people from having the basic means to survive. Austerity is designed to punish the already disenfranchised in targeted and violent ways, where families are cut off from the most basic needs of housing and food. Coronavirus has brutally exposed the economic failures of the Tory government and particularly the policies of austerity. In the pandemic, over 100,000 people have died as a result of the incompetence and the corruption of this Tory government. It is an insult to those who have died for the Tories to praise this government. But we should not forget that even before COVID, people were dying as a result of the appalling policies of this government. The government's own figures show that approximately 10,000 people died prematurely following work capability assessments for benefits. Thousands of people with severe health conditions such as heart disease and diabetes have died as a result of benefit sanctions. The 2-child limit for benefits, the benefit cap, the bedroom tax, the abolition of the social fund, the abolition of disability living allowance to PIP has left thousands of Harrow residents in poverty and led to many early deaths. Millions of people have not had an uplift of their benefit, despite the propaganda of this government. Those on legacy benefits, for example, of employment support allowance or income support were not given an uplift, and this group are more likely to be disabled. The uplift of universal credit, in part, seems to be no more than a con trick to get people off legacy benefits. A decade of cuts has also meant that the very agencies that protect us, such as the NHS, have been decimated by savage cuts. So we now have a widening class divide. On the one hand, we have the Tories handing out contracts worth billions to their mates, profiteering from the suffering of the majority of people. Then you have the 99% of the population struggling to balance the pressures of remote working and homeschooling. There are many who despair at this current situation and think we're living far removed from a fair society. Well, what COVID has highlighted so exceptionally well is that what is desperately needed is socialism. And what we're witnessing is that the old system of establishment politics, of corruption, greed and self-interest is dying. And I'll just finish by saying, Councillor Patel harked back to the times of a Conservative-led council when they didn't increase council tax. What he failed to tell you is that they removed social care from all disabled people in the borough. Luckily, my mum and many others were the people who challenged it in court and got it restored. Thank you,
She's
Mr. Mayor.
actually
Thank you.
personally attacking
Thank
me.
you.
Patel.
Okay, can I speak to Ajay Maru, please? Ajay bhai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support the budget that is in front of us here. As my colleagues have said, I'm not going to start repeating myself to the nitty-gritty of everything that's been said, but totally agree in what they have already said ahead of me, and especially echoing Sachin Kiran for valuing human lives, human values, needs, and getting the priorities first rather than getting into figures and so on. I would want to strongly, say that businesses and the entire team in the business side of, the council have done a fantastic job where we've been on the top 20% as a council to sort of give the grants off to the businesses in giving the grants in the rightful ways. So I would want to thank Sean and the entire team at the council and the entire staff for the wonderful work they've done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Antonio, you've got 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gosh, 7 years ago, when I was a young man, I knew what it was like to be in opposition in Harrow, and I can remember it. And there was a real energy, and there was an excitement, and there was an enthusiasm for the ideas and the ambitions that we had for this great borough again. And you can see that now, many years later, in the regeneration of Wealdstone, of South Harrow, across the borough. You can see it in the thousands of young people who've had apprenticeships or new jobs created through our work. You can see that in the gratitude and thanks and amazing work that was done to help families dealing with domestic violence issues in our first term. But what it just reminds me all about is just how tired the opposition look tonight, how tired and unimaginative and bored they are in their own speeches. It's quite sad to behold, and it doesn't surprise me, for a party that's 21 points behind in the London mayoral polls, that they are really, really struggling. But tonight, I mean, what were they trying to attack us on? We heard empty words of hope, but then there was something about the EU. Come on, guys, the EU, it's done. Let's move on. As somebody who runs a business that exports to the EU, I can say it's really working well. Thanks very much for that. They talk about government profligacy. But of course, government is giving local authorities way too much. They're not giving enough to Clandeboy Agencies, a sweet confectionery product firm who received a £108 million PPE contract. But of course, as well, this council is terribly, terribly guilty of a lack of financial transparency, whilst at the same time, they attack us for having too high borrowing but too large a surplus. It's all a little confused. And then we come to this very quaint little alternative budget that was written. And quite frankly, it could have been written at any time that I can remember alternative budgets being written. And their key lodestar policies are an illegal traffic enforcement plan, which doesn't cover powers which councils actually hold, ending without consultation one of their own government's policy priorities. And then the best of all is £163,000 bureaucracy enhancing and red tape smasheroo of a task force. I mean, we all long for those committee meetings again, but I don't know how many Garibaldis that would pay for. No, this isn't a serious opposition, and it's frankly a little bit insulting to the people of Harrow and the officers that have worked so hard during this very, very challenging year. So we're a serious administration, and when we set out, as we do in the borough plan and as we set out in our budget to deliver for the people of Harrow, that's what we go out to do. So let's maybe focus on the business elements, which has been mentioned a bit tonight. We believe that we need truly a thriving economy, and that's why there's been over 100 Kickstart apprenticeships launched and new jobs created as part of the work that we're doing that supports that. That means building skills to support local businesses. We know that a thriving economy needs great homes and infrastructure and people and consumers, and that's why regeneration has continued apace. And you can see that actually in the amazing Grange Farm regeneration work, which is truly a wonderful development. and that we know that a successful and thriving borough needs to tackle the injustices of poverty and inequality. And that's why we're facing headfirst to the real issues that the Black Lives Matter awareness that was raised last year has helped us all become so much more cognizant of, and also tackling the issue of low pay that's so endemic in our country and sadly our borough. But all of that's been faced whilst dealing with the greatest health and economic crisis of our lives, and hopefully there's no more. And let's just remember that everyone on the opposition side forgot tonight that we could have been Denmark, we could have been Australia, we could have been Taiwan, we could have been okay. But no, we haven't been. And it's wonderful to see the vaccination rollout. But that is an endeavour of our amazing NHS, our amazing local authorities, and our amazing volunteers locally. We're the top performing London borough for vaccinations. That's a wonderful thing. Business grants were in the top 20% in getting them delivered, and 30,000 people have been addressed with the community hub. We're standing up and facing those challenges, and we will deliver on a vision for the future. And if the opposition, tired though they may be, want to see what a real party looks like, then I suggest they read the borough plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we are coming on the closing speech, 5 minutes each. First one is Paul Osborne. Paul, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I am certainly tired of listening to Labour tonight. That undoubtedly is true. Councillor Assad talked about how depressed she was for the future and the young people of Harrow. I have to say, looking at the Labour Party tonight, I share some of that depression. It was incredible, Mr. Mayor. So many words by Labour, so little content. So many speeches, so few ideas, so much despair, so little hope, so much blame, so little responsibility, so much money spent on special responsibility allowances to the cabinet, and so little leadership. I was hoping to hear positive things that the council was planning to do. I even had a piece of paper ready to make some notes so I could respond in my summing up. Mr. Mayor, I'm afraid that paper remains empty. I was also expecting to hear an argument against our amendment. Again, I had a piece of paper ready to take notes so I could respond. I'm sad to say, Mr. Mayor, that bit of paper also remains empty. And to be clear, because I think it was mentioned by Councillor Ramchandani, this budget doesn't mean all staff of our contractors will be paid the London living wage. It merely puts aside a small pot of money on the off chance the council decides to go with an option in a contract that they may renew over the coming year, and the money is only for 1 year and would need to be funded with other money for future years. However, it's worth noting we supported that minimum wage motion, and we support the Harrow becoming a London living wage borough. But it's worth noting it was Boris Johnson as Mayor of London who made London a living wage city. Now, we were accused by Councillor Shah of moaning. In fact, Mr. Mayor, we were the only ones who weren't moaning. We were the only ones who were putting forward positive suggestions that Labour barely touched upon. So I ask, Mr. Mayor, to the Labour Party, why will you not implement 1 hour's free parking for Harrow for the next financial year? Why will you not crack down on illegal HMOs and beds in sheds? Why will you not spend more money on cleaning up fly tipping across Harrow? Why will you not remove the charge for collecting bulky waste? Why will you not invest in our town centre and our district centres? Why will you not give up on these LTNs? Why will you not instead spend money on trying to reduce speeding? Mr. Mayor, I thought tonight we were going to have a debate on the budget and the corporate plans. Instead, I seem to have gone into a group therapy session where Labour could talk about how much they hate the government, but how little they talked about how much they would want to do for Harrow. There is only one party in Harrow that offers hope. There is only one party in Harrow that offers action and positive suggestions to help people. There is only one party that should be running Harrow. That, Mr. Mayor, is my party, the Conservative Party.
Sorry,
You heard
Mr.
great...
Mayor.
Sorry, continue.
You've heard great speeches by all of my colleagues and so many empty words from Labour. So many. But I say to the Labour Party in Harrow, your time is up. Next time, in May next year, the people of Harrow will speak and they will say to Labour Party exactly what they said in Harrow East to Councillor Fitzpatrick.
1 minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I urge you all to vote for our amendment, to vote to give hope to residents and businesses. We have just coming to the end of what has been one of the difficult challenges in our lifetime. This budget does nothing to try and help with recovery. This budget does nothing to support the businesses in Harrow. This budget offers no leadership out of the COVID epidemic. What we have offered, small though they may be, is positive suggestions on things that could be done to help the people and businesses of Harrow. If you vote against this tonight, you will be voting against the people and businesses of Harrow. You will be voting to make people pay more for parking in our town and district centres. You'll be voting for less investment in our district centres. You'll be voting for more fly tipping and more fly tipping littering the streets. Mr. Mayor, I'm proud to move the amendment that we did tonight, and I know all my colleagues were proud to speak to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is Adam. Adam, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank my colleagues for their excellent speeches tonight, highlighting the incredible work of our council staff during the pandemic, showing the extreme challenges that people in Harrow are facing at the moment, and how this budget tackles the most important priorities we have in Harrow, whether building affordable and council housing, tackling low pay, fighting climate change, supporting those on the lowest incomes in our borough. But I must turn to the Conservative budget amendment, and I want to thank Councillor Osborne for putting forward one this year. I believe the first of his tenure as leader of the Conservatives.
We did it last year.
Unfortunately, Paul's blank piece of paper that sits in front of him might have been better this time, because to put forward something so opportunist, so short-termist, that uses our reserves and therefore puts our services at risk, something that the Section 151 officer highlighted in her response to the Conservative amendment, is unfortunately completely wrong for the people of Harrow. And let's respond to what Councillor Ashton told us. Because while some children in Harrow have been out of school, many children, for most of the year, while millions of people across the country are out of work, what is the Conservative response? Al fresco dining on St Anne's Road. Now, don't get me wrong, my fellow councillors, Mr. Mayor, I like a bit of al fresco dining, like the next person, but a random bung to St Anne's Road, where I live, is not the way to do it. And in fact, our approach, which is in this budget, is to invest in a multi-year way in our district centres across the borough, not just in the town centre. And we started with murals in Rayners Lane and Wildstone, and they've been outstanding and received very well. And now we're launching a programme which is in this budget across multiple years to invest in the borough, in district centres from South Harrow all the way to Edgware. Not just to create a cafe culture, but to bring back a vibrancy and dynamism to our streets, making them better for residents and supporting local businesses. Now, I'm happy to be teased about a Facebook video that I produced in order to communicate with residents. But it's no joke for Harrow residents that Rishi Sunak has chosen to fund local services through higher council tax. And if his party keeps going this way, it won't just be Paul's virtual background that shows an empty council chamber behind him. It will be reality next year as well. In conclusion, I want to thank Dawn Calvert and Sharon Daniels, our finance director and deputy finance director, for getting us to this balanced budget position despite all the challenges we faced. And despite the burdens that the government continues to put on us, we will invest in local services, we will deliver affordable homes, We will fight poverty and inequality, and we will work every day to keep building a better Harrow. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We now proceed to vote on item number 7 to 11. Item number 7, Borough Plan. Can we please vote on the Borough Plan? Is the recommendation agreed by the Labour Group? Graham?
Agreed.
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 By Conservative Group?
Agreed.
No. Mr. Mayor, can you please ask Labour just to let Graham vote? It doesn't help if everyone is trying to vote. We vote against the Borough Plan.
Okay, fine. Does any member wish to vote differently to their group? Thank you. The plan's agreed. Item number 8, Revenue Budget 2021. Can we vote on the amendment? Is that amendment agreed? Councillor Hanson?
No, Mr. Mayor, we wish to vote against the amendment.
Paul Osborne?
We wish to vote for the amendment.
Does any member wish to vote differently to the group? Thank you. That's not carried. We will now vote on the substantive recommendation on the budget. Please note that we have to record the names of all the members when voting on the budget. I will ask Hugh to read out members' name and record each vote. Hugh, down to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask each councillor alphabetically to say whether they are voting for, against or abstaining in relation to the budget. So if I can start with Councillor Almond, Richard Almond.
Against.
Dan Anderson.
Dan.
For the budget. Thank you. Jeff Anderson.
For.
Sue Anderson.
For, thank you. For.
Marilyn Ashton.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Paymana Assad.
Polite.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Camilla Bath.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Chris Baxter.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Phil Benjamin.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Michael Borio.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Simon Brown.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Gilbert.
Sarah Butterworth.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Cam Chana.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Ramji Chauhan.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Niraj Datani.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Keith Ferry.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Pamela Fitzpatrick.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Dean Gilligan.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Stephen Greek.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Chetna Halai.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Susan Hall.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Graham Henson.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Maxine Henson.
For, Mr. Mayor.
John Hinckley.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Nitesh Hirani.
He's gone.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Honey Jamie.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Amit Jogia.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
G. Lammerman.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
James Lee.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Dr. Leslie Lewinson.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Kareem America.
For, Mr. Mayor.
AJ Maru.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Jerry Miles.
For Mr. Mayor.
Veena Mithani.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Moshenson.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Chris Moat.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Janet Moat.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Angela Murphy Strachan.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Phil O'Dell.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Paul Osborne.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Mina Palmer.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Varsha Palmer.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Anjana Patel.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Primesh Patel.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Pritesh Patel.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
David Perry.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Natasha Proctor.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Kantilal Rabadia.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Kiran Ramchandani.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Christine Robson.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Linda Seymour.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Rekha Shah.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Sachin Shah.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Chloe Smith.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Norman Stevenson.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Krishna Suresh.
Mr. Mayor.
Sasi Suresh.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Adam Swirsky.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Bharat Thakur.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Antonio Weiss.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright. Deputy Mayor Gazanfar Ali.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, do you wish to vote?
Abstain, please.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, the budget is carried, and can I thank all councillors? We will record all those who voted for and against in the minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, can I just, as on a point of order, when we spoke to Democratic Services earlier, we were assured that both the amendment and the budget vote will both be recorded. Can we just confirm that that's the case?
You can please confirm that?
We will, Councillor Osborne, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 9, Treasury Management Strategy Statement. Can we please vote on the Treasury Management Strategy Statement? Is that recommendation agreed? Labour Group,
Yes, Mr.
Graham?
Mayor. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Paul Osborne?
Not agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Any member wish to vote differently to their group? It's carried. Capital Programme. Can we please vote on the capital programme? Is the recommendation agreed by the Labour Group? Graham?
Yes. Support, Mr. Mayor.
Paul?
Against, Mr. Mayor.
It's agreed. Housing revenue account. Can we please vote on the HRA and the MTFS? Is the recommendation agreed by the Labour Group? Graham?
Agreed. Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Paul Osborne?
Against, Mr. Mayor.
It's agreed. Item number 12, GAM's report. I call on Councillor David Perry to move the recommendation on item number 12 on the summons, please. David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to propose the annual report of the Governance, Audit, Risk Management and Standards Committee report for 2019-20. It is a brief report, but there's huge amounts of work that goes on behind that. And thank you to the members who do attend, Councillor Bardia as Vice Chair, and also his team, and also the Labour members. Often there's hundreds of pages worth of documents in order to go through at the meeting. And I've heard one or two councillors tonight question the transparency of the administration. I would encourage them to come along to the committee, where it's often quite a lively discussion, where we are very transparent and lots of information and financial reporting is put forward, not just on treasury management and governance, but audit, risk and fraud as well. So thank you, as I said, to those members, and obviously we get external support through our auditors, and much of our processes and procedures attract much positive comment, as well as scrutiny and challenge from opposition councillors as well. And so thank you to the hard-working teams within the council for all their work in what is quite a meaty part of the council's processes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can I please request everybody to mute if they're not speaking? I'm getting a lot of chatters in between.
Mr. Mayor, I have to leave for the next one. I have to leave for the next item, for 30.
No, no, we're not finished it yet, basically. Does any other member wish to speak? Okay, is the recommendation agreed by the Labour Group? Graham?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Conservative Group, Paul?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That's agreed. Okay, Karima, you want to leave now, is it? Item number 12. I call on Councillor Adam Swarsky to move the recommendation item number 13 on the summons.
I move for the recommendation, Mr.
Mayor. Keith, are you going to second it?
I am, Mr. Mayor. I wish to second the motion.
Does any member wish to speak? No. Is the recommendation agreed by the Labour Group? Councillor Henson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Paul?
No, Mr. Mayor.
It's agreed. Item number 14. I call on the Councillor James Lee to move the recommendations at item number 14 on the summons. James.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to say it's been a very hard year for everyone in the council. So I'm pleased to congratulate the pensions team run by Dawn Calvert and Rosie Maffins and the other members on winning a pension scheme administration award, which I put them up for. So that's great news in very, very hard time. And they're up against some very, very stiff competition. So congratulations to everyone in the council for that hard work. Therefore, I now move on to move the pensions report. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much, James. Does any other member wish to speak? No. Is the pension board annual report endorsed by the Labour Group? Councillor Henson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Paul?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Any member wish to vote differently on to the group? Thank you. It's agreed.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, could the Democratic Services invite Karima back into the meeting, please?
Yes.
I'm back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Karima. Information report. Decisions taken under the urgency procedure executive. Can we note the report, please? Graham?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Paul?
Noted, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's noted. There are no questions from the councillors. So we're going to item number 17, the motion. There is one notified motion before us this evening. I call upon Councillor Marion Ashton to move the motion. Are you moving the motion?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor. Sorry?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
you
can start. Yeah.
Can I have the second, please? Stephen, Greek, are you seconding the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I am perhaps the motion, and I also would like to speak on the motion.
Okay, Marilyn, do you want to speak for 5 minutes, please, as a proposer?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, it cannot have escaped anyone's notice that the good people of Harrow are exercised about tall buildings. The character of Harrow has changed over the last few years, and increasingly our skyline is now littered with high-rise tower blocks. There is, of course, a place for landmark buildings within the context of an area, and clearly our opportunity and intensification area is more suited to taller buildings than our leafy suburbs. The government is aware of these concerns and has effectively responded to the people's concerns by directing the London Mayor Khan to amend policy D9 of his London plan. The latest edition of the London plan is due to be published very shortly, having now been approved by the Secretary of State. This means that it carries statutory weight, and it won't be long before the 2016 version of the London plan will become obsolete. This gives us a golden opportunity to enshrine in policy our vision for Harrow, particularly in our suburbs and areas outside of the opportunity area. Failure to take advantage of this would be negligent and would give rise to our having to endure many, many more tower blocks and high-rise, unattractive structures. The notion that this council appears to believe that our 9-year-old core strategy is key and applies to everywhere in the borough irrespective is mistaken and shows a fundamental misunderstanding of the reworded tall building policy in the London plan and the opportunities that we must make to introduce some up-to-date clarity into our local plan. It is obvious that we must, without delay, get on and adopt a tall building policy of our own, limiting the height of buildings in our suburbs to 6 stories as set out in policy D9. This does not mean that buildings must be 6 stories high, but rather it gives a clear directive that buildings any taller than 6 stories will not be approved, and that 6 stories is therefore the absolute maximum height in our suburban areas and outside of our opportunity area. At the same time, we need to identify sites that are developable and refresh our site allocation policy by adopting robust and detailed supplementary planning documents, clearly setting out what we expect to see on these sites in terms of housing mix, density, and building heights. It is completely unacceptable to leave ourselves at the mercy of developers, thereby risking destroying the character of Harrow, which, if left unchecked, will be ruined by inappropriate developments on privately owned and developable sites. On council-owned sites, we should be willing to control building heights, but alas, under the current administration, we appear to be positively encouraging these massive tower blocks, a policy that we would reverse straight away upon taking control of the council. There is precedence for this, as we successfully adopted SPDs for our precious conservation areas, and we are reaping the benefit of the appraisals that were done. This was largely due to the Conservatives that this piece of work was done, and is critical to preserve and enhance the character and appearance of some of the most impressive parts of Harrow to safeguard our heritage. Mr. Mayor, I sincerely hope that all councillors can get behind this motion, that we can take advantage of the amendments to policy D9, the tall building policy and the publication version of the London plan. A cross-party vote for this motion will send a signal to our residents, many of whom care passionately about this, that this council intends to safeguard the character of the borough of Harrow.
1 minute left.
Simply will not tolerate high-rise tower blocks resulting in concrete jungles, a legacy that if we don't act now and reap the benefit of the amendments to policy D9, many will come to regret, by which time, Mr. Mayor, it will be too late. Once a building is there, it is there for 100 years and more. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Stephen Greek, please. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to second this motion this evening. In recent years, there's been a great deal of concern amongst many of us on both sides of the council and a significant number of Harrow residents about the increasing number of ugly and unwanted tower blocks being approved and built in Harrow. Often these are well over 10 stories and sometimes over 20 stories. For example, the ever-increasing heights on the former Kodak site, the 17-storey Palmerston Road scheme, and various schemes around College Road in the town centre. These are blighting Harrow's landscape and failing to provide the type of homes we need to see in Harrow. And they are not just confined to the opportunity area, but proposals are starting to appear in more suburban areas, prime examples being the recent applications on TfL car parks at Stanmore and Cannons Park stations. When tall buildings are approved on a site, they also create a precedent for surrounding sites, not just from a planning point of view, but because the ability to go tall is then priced into local land values. If we don't do something about this, we will reach a tipping point where large parts of our borough could be carpet bombed by unwanted and ugly tower blocks against the wishes or needs of our local residents. Well, the good news is now we can, if we as a council choose to do so. The new London plan, following some significant amendments from the government, now has a tall buildings policy, D9, which does a number of important things. It sets a default definition of a tall building as anything over 6 stories, but also makes clear that tall buildings should only be approved in defined areas as set by the local authority. So this provides Harrow with a great opportunity to define the areas where taller buildings may be appropriate, to set height limits for specific areas and sites, and crucially, to resist tall buildings elsewhere. It allows us to take control. Thank you. It allows us to take control and responsibility back into the council's hands, where it should be, on behalf of the residents we serve. We could protect the character and quality of life of our borough whilst giving certainty to developers. And the first step that each of us can take is to vote for this motion tonight. And I would urge everyone to do so, because if you vote against this motion, then you've also chosen not to take this opportunity to control tall buildings in Harrow with all the responsibility that goes along with that. For all of us as councillors, we owe it to our future generation to look after our local area and pass it on in a better condition than we found it. So I would urge everyone to give this motion their wholehearted support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Next speaker is Keith. Keith Ferry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion is fatally flawed in two respects. First of all, it misquotes policy D9 of the London Plan, which says, and I quote, based on local context, borough development plans should define what is considered a tall building. It then goes on to say you cannot class anything under 6 stories as a tall building. Boroughs should determine if there are locations where tall buildings may be an appropriate form of development. So far, rather than clamping down on tall buildings, my reading of D9 is that they are to be encouraged in certain areas. Secondly, it's flawed because supplementary planning documents add further detail to the local plan core strategy. They cannot change the local plan core strategy, even if it should be 9 years old. SPDs can be used to provide further guidance for developing specific sites or on particular issues such as design of buildings. SPDs are capable of being a material consideration in planning decisions, but they are not part of the local plan. If we wish to consider the subject of tall buildings, then we can take that into account when we revise the local plan, which should occur over the next 2 years or so. And finally, I point out that when I took on this job 10 years ago, our housing target was 360 dwellings a year. In the new plan coming out next week, that has risen to 802 dwellings per year. Now, if we are to stop building tall buildings and we are to have 802 family homes created every year, then I would invite somebody to tell me where we build them. Do we build them on open space, metropolitan open land, or even greenbelt? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next one, Norman Stevenson. Norman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, having just listened to Keith, Councillor Ferry, I think this is exactly why this motion is needed, and advice has been taken about the wording of it. Look, I can't think of anyone who actually likes having high buildings towering over communities, or maybe millionaire developers like that sort of thing, but why should we put up with it? My real concern, though, is what the buildings do for people who live in them and the communities around them. I've got 3 reports here I'm just going to quote from quickly. One is by an organisation called Smart Cities. It's an international organisation, and it's headed 7 reasons why high-rise kill livability. And it was written back in 2017. And it mentions here high-rises radically reduce chance encounters and propinquity. Great word, I'd never heard of that. It means the state of being close to someone or something. But more importantly, there's a psychologist, Daniel Cannon, who writes in the Canadian Journal of Public Health that high rises keep children and the elderly from getting the exercise, the extra effort it takes to get outside, encourage them to stay at home and flip on the TV. High rises, it says, deprives people, and especially children, of neighbourhood, peers and activities. And he believes that the level of alienation and isolation things that have been proven to negatively impact health and mental health and even shorten people's lives, increased with the height of the building. Second report, last year, Wright Hassel, who do work in London on regional environment development and local charities. And basically the report is, could COVID-19 bring the end of high-rise and cramped living? But it goes on about how this is a really good opportunity for us as a society to do something about the effects on people's health. And the last report is one from UCL, Loneliness and Social Isolation Network. Are high-rise residential buildings implicated in our social well-being and mental health? And the answer is yes, the report says. Look, Councillor Robson said earlier that the Labour budget promoted well-being in Harrow. Research shows that high-rise buildings affects adversely well-being. The council leader spoke earlier about addressing inequality. Research shows that high-rise increases inequality. So evidence shows that high-rise affects people's mental health. Come on, councillors, let's show we care about the people of Harrow and our environment. Let's support the motion to take back control of our planning policy by adopting these supplementary planning documents to save our borough. Thank you.
Sachin Sharpley. Sachin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's been a number of really interesting comments that have come out of the debate so far from both Labour and Conservative speeches. But what they show is there is absolutely a debate that needs to be had about where tall buildings are, where we put them, how tall they are. But the problem with the motion is that it puts the debate in the wrong place. As Keith pointed out, the SPD isn't technically the right place to do it. But even if it was, the debate about where tall buildings go and how we meet our housing target should be in a local plan review. We are due a local plan review as a council very soon. That is the time that we should have a proper debate about tall buildings, where they should go. This motion does it the wrong way at the wrong time, and therefore I'll be voting against. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Marilyn, would you like to exercise the right to reply, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you. And I know that what supplementary planning documents are, and of course it's not perfect, but we don't have time. The problem, we're under a lot of pressure. So what supplementary planning documents can do is they can, if you can sort of imagine a coat hanger, they kind of hang off the core strategy. And what they do is they give some weight, quite a lot of weight actually, so that if you get an application in on a site that you know is developable in the suburbs for, say, a building of 12 stories high, and you've got a supplementary planning document adopted for that site, you can quite legitimately say, well, I'm sorry, guys, we're not having that size building there. We will only tolerate a building up to that level. Of course, we need to amend our local plan, but that takes a couple of years. And the reason why I wanted to do it this way, or suggested doing it this way in this motion, is because for the time being, at least it gives us some clout at appeal. Now, I don't think that Keith Ferry fully understands this, and that's the reason why we've got so many of these ghastly high-rise buildings, down to him actually, all over the borough, that he has encouraged. In fact, I nicknamed 51 College Road, and I'll share this with you, I haven't shared it with anyone until tonight, I nicknamed them Ferry's Towers, because we had a really good result at the appeal there at 51 College Road, and we ended up with these very tall buildings. And if you ask anybody who lives on Harrow on the Hill, they'll tell you that these buildings do adversely affect the primacy of the views of St Mary's Spire, and more particularly from St Mary's Spire. We are ruining our borough brick by brick, and we have to do something quickly and efficiently. We've been given a chance in policy D9, which again Keith Ferry has not understood. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. He hasn't understood it. It gives us an opportunity to draw a line in the sand. We have a way of doing it that's quicker. Yes, of course, when we win next year, we will do our local plan in a way that does restrict the height and take advantage of the opportunity of policy D9. But for the time being, at least if we could do this, it don't take that long to do, on sites that we know that are coming up for development, we could legitimately say no and win an appeal. This is critical, or we're going to end up ruining this borough. And I can tell you that the residents of Harrow, if this is not cross-party tonight, would take away from this tonight that the Labour Party in Harrow want tower blocks. And they've learnt nothing about what people need and what kind of developments that we need to be encouraging. It would be very, very disappointing if the Labour Party in Harrow couldn't support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Melanie. Can we now vote on the motion?
Mr. Mayor, before we vote, I would like to ask for a roll call vote.
Is it supported by the people?
Roll call vote, Mr. Mayor.
Roll call.
Roll call vote, Mr. Mayor.
Roll call, okay.
Roll call, Mr. Mayor.
That's fine, that's
Roll
fine, okay.
call, Mr. Mayor. Roll call, Mr. Mayor.
Roll call,
That's
Mr.
okay.
Mayor.
Okay, roll call. Can you take the floor, please?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Roll call. Roll call.
Mr. Mayor.
Roll call, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
You will take the roll call. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I'll go through each councillor alphabetically as before. You can indicate whether you're voting for or against the motion in respect of supplementary planning document. Start with Councillor Richard Armand.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Dan Anderson.
Against.
Jeff Anderson.
Against.
Sue Anderson.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Marilyn Ashton.
2 votes and 3 Anderson.
For, Mr. Mayor.
It's got very long.
Pimana Assad.
Against.
Camilla Bath.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Chris Baxter.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Philip Benjamin.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Michael Borrio.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Simon Brown.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Sarah Butterworth.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Cam Chana.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Ramji Chauhan.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Niraj Jatani.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Keith Ferry.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Pamela Fitzpatrick.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Dean Gilligan.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Stephen Greek.
For the motion, Mr. Mayor, and against ugly tower blocks.
Chetna Halai.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Susan Hall.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Graham Henson.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Maxine Henson.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
John Hinckley.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Nitesh Hirani.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Honey Jamie.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Amit Jogia.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Jean Lammerman.
For, Mr. Mayor.
James Lee.
Abstain, Mr. Mayor.
Dr. Leslie Lewinson.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Karima Marikal.
Just to say, Tories have again talked the talk, not walk the walk. Can I say, you all are the
Please vote,
police, the Dandara.
Karima, can you say if you're voting for or against?
For.
You're
not
not supposed to give speech here.
AJ Maru.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Jerry Miles.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Fina Mithani.
For the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Amir Moshenson.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Chris Moat.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Janet Moat.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Angela Murphy Strachan.
Against, Mr. Mayor.
Phil O'Dell.
Phil.
Phil.
He's in bed.
Oh, okay. Paul Osborne.
For, Mr. Mayor.
Against, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, connection.
Okay,
problem.
thank you, Councillor Adele.
Thank you, Hugh.
Mina Palmer,
For Mr Mayor.
Barsha Palmer,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Anjana Patel,
For the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Primesh Patel,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Pritesh Patel,
For Mr Mayor.
David Perry,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Natasha Proctor,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Kantanal Rabadia,
For the motion, Mr Mayor.
Kieran Ramchandani,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Christine Robson,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Linda Seymour,
For Mr Mayor.
Rekha Shah,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Sachin Shah, Sachin,
Against, Mr Mayor.
thank you. Chloe Smith,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Norman Stevenson, Norman, come back.
No,
Krishna
muted.
Suresh,
Against, Mr Mayor.
sorry, Krishna, can you say how you're voting?
Against. Mayor.
Thank you. Sasi Suresh,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Adam Swirsky,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Bharat Thacker,
For Mr Mayor.
Antonio Weiss,
Against, Mr Mayor.
Stephen Wright. Can I come back? Norman Stevenson. Norman, are you there?
Is written on message for Mr.
Just texted.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr Deputy Mayor Kazamfar Ali, do you wish to vote?
Against, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Mr Mayor, do you wish to vote?
Abstain, please.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
Abstain, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I've just seen in the chat that Norman Stevenson is voted for. Thank you, Norman. So the motion is lost, Mr Mayor.
Motion is lost. Thank you very much. We now come to the end of the meeting, but before I close it down, I would like to thank the IT staff and the democratic services who made all this virtual meeting happen throughout the year. You don't realize how much work they go through behind the scene to make it happen. Thank you both, and thank you for doing what you've been doing. And I'm sure your service will be required even slightly longer. This is the end of the meeting. I look forward to seeing you at the annual meeting on Wednesday, 5th of May, 2021. Thank you and have a good evening. Thank you very much.